Chapter 51, Reinforcements. Count Croya said, "The kingdom has decided to send reinforcements to us. The reinforcements are already on their way here." Everyone was overjoyed. "That's great. At least His Majesty hasn't lost his mind. Without Twilight Fortress, they will be finished. How many more people are there?" Everyone's gazes turned towards the Count once again. Count Croya hesitated for a moment and suddenly said in a shocking tone, "One." Everyone was shocked. "What?" But then, everyone thought that it was not right. They all looked at Count Croya with strange expressions, waiting for a reasonable explanation. After all, if the king was not prepared to make them rebel collectively, he would not have made such a teasing arrangement. Count Croya was also puzzled. He turned to ask Heath in surprise, "This is also what I don't understand. Sir Wizard, I hope that you can give us an explanation." Heath raised his eyebrows. "Please speak, sir." Count Croya handed the letter to Heath. Heath took it and glanced at it. He suddenly understood. The letter said that the Shadow Tower had sent a high-level apprentice over. And this apprentice was carrying an official wizard tool. Count Croya said in puzzlement, "If His Majesty is not prepared to let us die on the battlefield, then this additional member should be trustworthy. Is that so, Sir Wizard?" They did not understand wizards. High-level apprentices and official wizard tools, they had no concept at all. Heath put down the letter and nodded. If the additional member on the letter can arrive, then the army outside the city is nothing to worry about. An official wizard tool was equivalent to the power of a wizard. After a pause, he added, "The enemy's undead army was summoned by an official wizard tool." Hearing Heath's reply, everyone in the meeting room heaved a sigh of relief. They had been together with Heath for some time and knew that this wizard was very reliable. Since he had given the answer, this unknown addition must be very powerful. Moreover, they had just experienced the power of the enemy's magic. Heath continued, "But the person on the letter requires us to hold on for 6 days. The fastest time for the addition is the 7th day. Everyone looked at the Count again. The Count nodded and said, "If Campbell does not come personally, then it would not be a big problem." According to the knight that Heath had captured previously, the undead army controlled by the enemy could only hold the city for an hour at a time. After that, they would need a day to recover. If it was only an hour, as long as they were properly commanded, it would be very easy to defend the city. The Count is right. If these army of the dead dare to come up again, let them die once more. The atmosphere in the meeting room became much livelier. However, Heath carefully noticed that the Count was still frowning. He could not help but ask, "Your Excellency, is there any other problem?" Count Croya sighed softly and said, "I did not know that the commander who led the check to fight against the Riker this time was actually Campbell until I just received His Majesty's reply. Campbell was the military commander of the Red Devil Blood side this time." Heath raised his eyebrows and waited quietly for the next part. The Count did not let Heath wait for long and quickly continued to explain, "That was a madman born for war. No one could defeat him in a military contest." After listening to Count Croya's introduction, Heath had a general understanding of such a person. Simply put, this was an outstanding military strategist among humans. He was often active on the war stage in the Dark Lands. Including Count Croya, many lords and knights of this generation had been beaten by him until they lost their armor. Count Croya said in fear, "What benefits did the Jedians and Rikers give him? They actually invited this madman to fight this war." Heath said, "It shouldn't be a big problem. According to the letter, our main force has several times more people than them. There are also 2 wizards guarding it, so it shouldn't be a problem." Heath was a faction of power. In his opinion, wisdom was only effective when they were evenly matched. All the conspiracies and tricks were like paper tigers in front of absolute power. The Count sighed softly. "I hope so." Count Croya quickly stopped this topic that might affect the morale of the army. He immediately changed the topic and said gratefully to Heath, "Thank you, Sir Wizard. If you hadn't killed the enemy general in time, we might have suffered a huge loss." At this point, he could not help but say in surprise, "I really didn't expect that Sir Wizard, at such a young age, already has the strength of a high-level knight." He had listened to the knight's report about what happened on the battlements. Heath shook his head and said, "We do not want to lose this war." After a pause, he continued half-jokingly, "As for my knight's strength, if it was someone else's praise, I would be very happy. But Your Excellency, are you really not making fun of me? Your Excellency should be about to break through to a Grand Knight, right. On the battlefield, Heath had just found out that Count Croya actually had the strength of a peak-level knight. Ha ha ha. Count Croya laughed loudly. After laughing for a while, he could not help but shake his head, but if it's a grand knight, then forget it. I have never considered having that kind of strength. Heath raised his eyebrows and asked curiously, even with your talent, you don't have the confidence to advance to the grand knight level. To be able to reach the pinnacle of knights meant that one already had the highest level of the knight talent. Count Croya shook his head and said, it has nothing to do with talent. What is needed to become a grand knight is the knight's heart. Only those who have a knight's heart can become a grand knight. Heath asked doubtfully, knight's heart. He really did not know anything about grand knights, including the information about them in the tower. Count Croya nodded and explained in detail, humility, honesty, compassion, heroism, justice, sacrifice, honor, and soul. Every virtue represents a knight's heart. Only those who have mastered the virtue can have the heart of a knight and advance to grand knight. Heath was speechless. There was such a saying? The count said, leave the power of the guardian to the guardian. If I follow the rules, the head of the Croya family will be hung on the city wall tomorrow. Heath had a similar expression. It seemed that he had no hope of advancing to a grand knight by himself in this lifetime. After all, no matter how much he thought about it, he could not find a match with any of the above. He just did not know if this kind of knight's heart could also be extracted. If it could be, what effect would that have? Even though Count Croya had deliberately emphasized to Heath the terror of the human military commander in this military meeting, Heath had never fought with this person, after all. No matter how much the Count said, he could not understand it. But what he did not expect was that in just a short 2 days, he had already experienced the terror of the human's wisdom. On the morning of the third day, Twilight Fortress. In the hall of the fortress, Count Croya, Heath, and even a group of Riiden city knights were gathered here. Everyone's faces were gloomy as they looked forward. In front of them were a few corpses neatly placed on the blankets. They were the 4 apprentices who had gone out to have fun, including Twin and Wesley. Without exception, the 4 of them had all turned into corpses at this moment. Heath looked at these pigheads speechlessly. Although he had long thought that they were unreliable, he had never thought that they would collapse to such an extent. They lay dead without a single shot being fired. Forget it, at least contribute some residual value. Shaking his head, Heath walked forward and pressed a hand on the apprentice's chest. Extraction. Beep, extraction successful. Spiritual power plus 0.03. Beep, extraction successful. Obtain spell model Frost. Beep, extraction successful. Wizard talent plus 1. Current wizard talent, 4. Rating, medium. Chapter 52, Witchcraft. On the other side, in the enemy camp. On an empty space on the east side of the camp, a brazier was burning. Even in the daytime, it gave off a very eerie feeling. Here, the main generals of the enemy also gathered together and formed a circle, looking at the center. On the ground in the middle was a huge hexagram magic array formed by white candles, stones, and animal organs. In the middle of the magic circle lay a naked girl. The girl was dead, her empty eyes wide open. Da-da-da. At this moment, footsteps came from behind. A young man in a cloak walked over, and Princess Trish followed him, holding a wooden tray in her hand. Everyone saluted respectfully. Sir Wizard. The man raised his hand and glanced at the girl. Is this the sacrifice? Are you sure she's a virgin? If she's not a virgin, the evil god won't accept it. A knight stood out and knelt on one knee. I swear in the name of the Bellamy family, this girl has never been fucked by a man. The wizard nodded and walked to the girl. He raised his hand and patted it lightly. Pada, pada. Bang. The white candles on the ground suddenly burst into flames. Although this was not the first time that everyone had seen extraordinary powers on the way, it still caused a wave of exclamations. The male wizard said, Trish. Princess Trish walked forward and held a wooden tray in both of her hands. On the tray was a silver dagger, some hair, blood, meat pieces, and so on. The male wizard took down the dagger first and made a cut on the girl's wrists and ankles. Gulp. Gulp. Dark red blood gushed out from the knife and gradually spread to the entire magic circle along the trajectory of the magic circle on the ground. The male wizard picked up the hair and asked, Is this the hair of those Shadow Tower apprentices? A knight bowed and said, Yes, sir. Our assassins brought it back. The male wizard nodded and threw a lock of the hair into the brazier beside him. Sizzle! The hair burned into a wisp of black smoke. The black smoke twisted strangely in the air for a while before surging towards the young girl on the ground and entering through her nose and mouth. The male wizard followed suit and burned the remaining few substances into black smoke that surged into the young girl. Then, he picked up the dagger and gently cut open the young girl's chest, revealing the living heart inside. Then, he picked up the last item on the tray. It was a small glass bottle with a little bit of blood inside. That was Count Croix's blood. At the same time, Twilight Fortress. Beep, extraction successful. Wizard talent +1. Beep, extraction successful. Acquired spell model Ice Shield. Beep, extraction successful. Spirit plus. Heath then proceeded to extract the remaining 3, obtaining a total of 2 wizard talents, 0.1 spirit power, 2 spells Lightning Strike and Ice Shield, as well as a piece of knowledge, Bone Creature Bloodline Basics. After upgrading, the wizard talent had reached 6 points, reaching the peak of intermediate talent. Count Croix's face was gloomy as he questioned the soldier who was escorting Wesley and the others. What's going on? I need a reasonable explanation. The soldier said with a trembling voice, It's an assassin. The assassin disguised as a prostitute in a brothel. From the soldier, Heath and the others knew the whole story. After Wesley and the others went to the town, they went straight to the famous local brothel to find women and have fun. But they never expected that there were actually assassins trained by the Riker Duchy hidden here. They killed 3 people while Wesley and the others were having fun. The remaining apprentice was assassinated while she was strolling along the road. The assassin disguised himself as an ordinary merchant, so no one expected it. The Count's eyes turned red. He kicked the soldier away. You bunch of trash! You can't even do such a small thing well. You've all grown up eating shit. 4 apprentices had died at once. Not to mention the loss of combat power, how to explain it to the Shadow Tower was the biggest problem. A few soldiers knelt on the ground, shivering. Sir, please spare me. The Count pressed his hand on the hilt of his sword angrily, and the killing intent in his eyes became more and more intense. Seeing this, Heath quickly tried to persuade him. It has nothing to do with them. Since the enemy arranged it this way, they must have planned it in advance. Heath's judgment was not wrong. The commander of the enemy had indeed planned the assassination from the beginning. However, the enemy's original target was only the knights who went out to have fun. To be able to get such a big fish was completely out of the enemy's expectations. The Count gritted his teeth. Campbell! This despicable bastard! Heath was also a little surprised. Although the enemy's battle results were partly due to luck, to be able to make such a plan showed that the other party's control over the battlefield was indeed not weak. With the temperament of these noble knights, even if there were no apprentices, there would be people who would fall for it sooner or later. Then, Heath said, now is not the time to be angry. Pull them away and burn them. However, after hearing Heath's order, the surrounding soldiers hesitated and did not follow it. Heath asked, What? The Count said, Sir Wizard, forget it. The wizards are all here to serve us. In a sense, they are also sacrificing for this fortress. Their bodies should not be destroyed again. The ordinary soldiers' bodies were burned. They were from the Shadow Tower. Where did he get the courage to burn them? Heath shook his head and insisted, Sir Count, believe me. If you have any knowledge of magic, you will not have such thoughts. He had examined the bodies carefully when he was extracting them. He found that some hair, skin, and blood were missing from the bodies. Although he did not know whether they were not missing during the battle or were taken away on purpose, either way, there was a risk. In the field of magic, there were too many curses, sacrifices, and other types of black magic. As long as one possessed a part of the opponent's body, they could cast spells across thousands of miles. The Count was still very hesitant. Even if they are really controlled, there are only 4 of them. Do you think? Heath said unyieldingly, this matter cannot be doubted. If you are worried about the Shadow Tower, then I will bear all the responsibility if anything happens. At this point, Heath shook his head again. Forget it, I will do it myself. These noble knights looked worried. Then, he reached out and grabbed a ball of fire. He then threw it at the body of a male apprentice. The fire quickly exploded on the body. Amidst the exclamations, the blazing fire licked the body of the corpse and quickly burned up. Then, Heath waited for a while, waiting for his mind to stiffen. Any spell had a mind-stiffening effect. The same spell model could not be repeated for a short period of time, so it could be understood as a skill cooldown. Forcibly casting it would cause damage to mind power, and even bring irreparable consequences. The basic spell Fireball only froze one's mental strength for about 10 seconds. Soon, Heath's second fireball was in his hand again. Heath did the same thing and threw the fireball at the second corpse. Just as the fireball was about to hit the door, the corpse suddenly opened its eyes. Crack! At the same time, a crisp crack suddenly sounded. An ice shield suddenly appeared in front of the corpse, and the fireball exploded into sparks on the ice shield. Heath's expression changed. Be careful! Crackle crackle! Almost at the same time he shouted, a crisp sound like fried beans exploded. A ball of purple-blue lightning suddenly exploded from another corpse. Chapter 53, Confrontation. Crackle crackle! Boom! Like a substation that suddenly exploded, purple lightning shot out with a loud bang, directly exploding in the crowd. On the spot, 2 soldiers who were caught off guard were electrocuted into charcoal, and the apprentice knights were also sent flying. Even the few knights present were heavily injured. After all, no matter how strong the knights were, they were just mortal bodies and could not defend against the lightning. Only Heath was safe. The mimicry shield that was activated in time turned into a semicircular eggshell and blocked the incoming lightning. Sir! Wizard, what's going on? Count Croya, who was protected by Heath, asked in a frightened voice. Heath looked ahead and said warily, I said they are not safe. After a simple explanation, he immediately said, well, Lord Count, if you don't want us to be wiped out by the enemy, quickly calm down your knights. The 3 apprentices wizards, under the premise of not revealing his strength as a middle-level apprentice, Heath was not confident of winning alone. You are right, Sir Wizard. After all, he was also experienced in the battlefield, so the Count quickly got rid of his fear. He pulled out his cross-sword and ordered, draw your sword and prepare for battle. Clang! Clang! The cold sound of metal interweaving could be heard. With the Count as their backbone, the knights quickly identified themselves and drew their cross-swords to prepare for battle. The Count humbly asked, Sir Wizard, we will listen to your arrangements for this battle. He did not dare to be arrogant in front of magic. In the face of the battle, Heath was not polite. He quickly scanned the situation and quickly made an analysis. The apprentices who were revived were the low-level apprentice, Twin, Heath's contemporary Wesley, and the unknown female apprentice. Among them, Twin was the strongest. He was the one who had released the lightning just now. The spell extracted from Wesley's body was Ice Shield. In addition, he should have mastered an offensive spell. They had discussed it when they were in the tower. The remaining unknown female apprentice, he had not extracted that knowledge from her body. For the time being, he did not know her ability. This was a very troublesome matter. After all, magic was mysterious and unpredictable. It could easily bring a devastating blow to ordinary humans. So after thinking for a moment, Heath quickly made a decision. You guys step back first. I'll go up and try. Then be careful, my lord. Count Croya instructed, and then he said to a knight beside him, send the archers over. Yes. The knight went down. On the other side, the battle between Heath and the apprentices also drew to a close. He summoned a fireball in advance and threw it at Twin. The extraction just now allowed him to know that the lightning strike spell had nearly a minute of mental paralysis. During this period of time, he no longer had to worry about the attack of this spell. Boom! The fireball exploded on the ice shield again. Wesley, who was next to him, made his move. This spell was also extracted by Heath into his mind. Its defense coefficient was almost enough to withstand the bombardment of 6 of his fireballs. However, Heath did not only use fireballs. When the fireballs were blocked, he also released his wizard's hand in time. Clang! Clang! The sound of metal interweaving could be heard. The 2 cross-guard swords on the ground shot out like sharp arrows from behind and attacked Twin. At the same time, Heath quickly rushed forward and charged towards Twin. The area of the ice shield was only about 1 square meter. It could block the back but not the front. In the blink of an eye, Heath had already appeared in front of Twin. The cross-guard sword in his hand slashed forward, and the cross-guard swords from behind arrived almost at the same time. The ice shield flickered twice and finally went around to the back to block the arrow behind him. The exposed front was about to be heavily injured by Heath's cross-shaped sword, but at this moment, a figure suddenly blocked in front of Twin. The female apprentice next to him. The female apprentice raised her hands and crossed them to meet Heath's cross-shaped sword. She actually wanted to block the sharp cross-shaped sword with her flesh and blood. The next second, the two collided. Clang! The expected separation of flesh and bone did not happen. Instead, there was the sound of metal colliding like a gong, and sparks even flew from where they came into contact. A row of sharp white bones suddenly appeared on the back of the female apprentice's hand. The white bones pierced through her skin and were directly exposed to the air. There was a metallic luster on them, as if they were two blades that grew on her hands. So it's the power of bloodline. Combined with the knowledge he obtained from the witch. Bone creature bloodline basics, Heath quickly recognized the identity of the witch's current spell. It was a type of bloodline power. Whoosh! Whoosh! At the same time, two crisp arrows sounded. Two ice arrows shot out from Wesley's hand and went straight for Heath's face. A silver light flashed in front of Heath, and the mimicry shield quickly appeared. Crack! Crack! The ice arrows broke into pieces. After blocking the ice arrows, Heath did not continue to pursue. Instead, he quickly retreated. Almost at the same time as he retreated, a ball of lightning suddenly erupted from Twin's hands. The corner of Heath's clothes was struck. At the spot where he had just stood, it caused a large hole to appear on the ground. Looking at the terrifying destructive power, Heath could not help but smack his tongue. Being hit by this thing with all his strength, even using a mimicry shield, he would not feel good. Standing still, Heath did not continue to attack. Instead, he opened his mouth and said to Count Croya, "Your Excellency, take your men and surround the brown-haired one. Pay attention to his ice arrows. I will try to pull the witch beside him to the side. I will deal with the yellow-haired one last. Pay attention to his lightning. He will release it every minute. Before that, I will give a timely warning. When you hear it, retreat immediately." The Count immediately said, "Yes." He raised his cross sword and shouted, "Warriors of the Croya family, raise your swords and follow me. Kill! Kill! Kill!" The knights' voices were like thunder. The battle began once again. With the information provided by Heath, the following battles were much easier. The Count led a group of knights and apprentice knights to besiege Wesley, while Heath fought the bloodline witch alone. The only thing that needed to be paid attention to was Twin's lightning strike. This intermediate apprentice spell could kill almost any knight on the scene in an instant. However, Heath would read the seconds every time and give a timely warning before the lightning strike was about to arrive. The power of this powerful spell could no longer be used. Under such a steady step, the situation was quickly under control. First, Wesley's ice shield was broken under the siege of the knights. Heath took the opportunity to throw a fireball and burn it into a ball of flames. Then, the witch was forced to the center of the open space by Heath. Finally, she was nailed to the ground by the archers. The last remaining Twin was unable to make any waves. He was quickly killed by Heath and the others. Phew! After killing the last Twin, the knights heaved a sigh of relief. Their eyes were full of fear. Count Croya was also fearful. If it was not for Heath's timely reminder, they might have been wiped out by the enemy. After all, the command system of the fortress was all here. He put away the two crossguard swords and walked to Heath. He bowed deeply and said, "Sir Wizard, thank you very much." Just as he said this, his voice suddenly stopped. As if he had encountered something extremely painful, the Count's face suddenly twisted. "Ah!" He let out a scream and pressed his hand on his chest. Seeing the Count's expression, Heath's face suddenly darkened, and a strong sense of foreboding swept over his body and mind. "Sir Count! What happened?" Everyone rushed over in a panic. However, before they could get close, a strange scene appeared. The Count's chest suddenly split open and a bloody hole appeared. Then, something drilled out from inside. It was actually a hand. It was a bloody hand. It grabbed the Count's heart and drilled out from the Count's chest. As the Count screamed in pain, it crushed the Count's heart. Clang! The Count's right hand loosened, and the cross-guard sword fell to the ground. He then knelt on one knee and fell forward. With a thud, he fell to the ground. "No! Sir Count!" The knights' voices were filled with despair. At the same time, a cloud of black smoke surged out of the Count's body and rapidly transformed into a human face in the air. The human face swept his gaze across the crowd and finally locked onto Heath, who was not far away. His expression was contemptuous, and he had an arrogant look on his face. As if he was venting his anger, he said in an extremely arrogant and provocative manner, "Little thing, you're quite capable. Come again. Let me see if you can hold on for one more time. You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." After saying this, there was a bang, and his face exploded into a cloud of black smoke and disappeared. Heath held the cross-shaped sword and turned his head to look in the direction of the enemy camp. His expression was dark and cold. Chapter 54, I'll do it. Enemy camp, east side. Whoosh. A gust of cold wind swept over from afar, and the candles on the ground were all extinguished at this moment. The magic array that was originally shining with a blood-red demonic light also dimmed. Then, standing in the middle of the altar, the wizard priest pulled his hand out from the girl's chest. In his hand, he was still holding the crushed heart. He shook off the blood and flesh residue on his hand. Water. Princess Trish came up with a silver basin filled with water. The wizard put his hand into the water and began to wash it. Trish asked, "Sir Wizard, how is it? Is everything going well?" She had just seen Wizard Prit frowning when he was casting a spell, and he looked very angry. Prit snorted lightly and said, "I met a reckless little apprentice, a self-righteous thing, and he actually dared to block my spell." Trish frowned slightly. Then, Prit waved his hand and said as if nothing had happened, "That little piece of trash is not worthy to be my opponent. That human count has been dealt with. You can attack at any time." Trish's brows relaxed, and a hint of joy appeared on her face. The generals surrounding them were also overjoyed. "Haha! That's great! Without Croya, the remaining people are all useless. Who else can stop us? Break through Twilight Fortress and kill all of them." Prit pulled Trish into his embrace, and said with a smile, "My little beauty, how should you thank me?" Trish let out a flirtatious murmur and asked in a teasing tone, then, Sir, how do you want Trish to thank you?" "Haha." Prit pressed Trish onto the altar beside him and lifted up her skirt. The surrounding knights tactfully lowered their heads and retreated. Then, "My lord and your highness, we will go and attack the city." Go. Twilight Fortress. Clang. 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 The sound of the alarm bell rang out, and the soldiers ran back and forth, and the whole fortress was in chaos. "The enemy has begun to assemble. Where is the count? Where are the knights? The count is wounded, and the wizard is treating him. Then what should we do? Who is going to give the command? The enemy is going to attack." In the conference room, the door was tightly locked. The knights stared at the conference table in front of them with dark expressions. On the conference table, Count Croya's clothes were removed and placed flat on it. In the large hole in his chest, there were black leaves, strange flowers, animal bones, and so on. Heath stood in front of the conference table with one hand on the Count's chest, chanting an obscure incantation. He was still making his final effort to resurrect Count Croya. Wizards' understanding of life forms was different from that of mortals. Such injuries were obviously dead in the eyes of mortals, but in the eyes of wizards, as long as the soul was not damaged, there was a possibility of resurrection. When learning life science, every wizard had learned resurrection. Most healing spells in the world also used this as the core principle. The incantation continued. The material in the Count's chest began to slowly melt into a pool of material that was connected to flesh and blood. The flesh and blood inside seemed to have begun to grow again. However, not long after, the mass of material suddenly expanded outward, and then with a poof sound, it deflated. Heath frowned. Failed. Although this resurrection was not a particularly high-end spell in the wizard world, it was still far from what a young apprentice like him could cast. A knight walked forward and asked nervously, "Sir Wizard, the Count is..." Heath shook his head. "I'm sorry, I've tried my best." Everyone's faces darkened. At this moment, Heath suddenly heard chaotic footsteps and the sound of a bell ringing outside. He could not help but ask, "What's going on outside? Why is it so noisy?" He had been concentrating on casting spells just now. The knight smiled bitterly. "The enemy is ready to attack us, sir." Heath was stunned. He was shocked. "Then you're still here. Perhaps they had seen the look on Heath's face. The knight's eyes became evasive, and they looked very embarrassed. In the end, it was still the knight from before who said bitterly, "Sir, besides the count, no one here has the confidence to win this war." Before the knights in this world were given their titles, their main focus was on improving their strength. They would only learn how to lead the army and how to plan the war when they had their own fiefdoms. Heath frowned. Where are the reinforcements? Where are they now? Before the war started, the count had gathered all the vassals from all over to rush over. Those viscounts and barons were veterans who had been on the battlefield for a long time. Heath did not believe that they would not be able to pull out any of them who could fight. The knight smiled bitterly and said, "They are still on the way." After a pause, he explained, "And based on the current situation, I'm afraid they will only be on the way for a long time." There were spies of various nobles in the fortress. The news of the 10,000-strong army attacking this place had long been spread back. Everyone was fighting to rush forward to take advantage of the situation. Who would go forward to die? When the count was in front, everyone would still wait and see. Now that the count was dead, it would be a miracle if these shrewd nobles would take another step forward. Heath frowned. Then what now? Could they only leave? The role of a commander in the army was self-evident. The effect of reasonable command and deployment had been fully reflected in the previous battle. An army could not be left without a general. Now that there was no one to command, what was the point of fighting? Failure seemed to be a foregone conclusion. But he was really unwilling. From the results of the extraction 2 days ago, it could be seen that Heath's previous judgment was not wrong. Under the millstone of war, it really helped his strength greatly. Not only had his knight talent leveled up to high level, his wizard talent had also leveled up to intermediate level. There was no need to mention the growth of his other attributes and spells. It was not an exaggeration to say that the short 2 days before was at least comparable to his results of a few months, more than half a year. It was not easy to feel such a rocketing upgrade, and he was enjoying it. It was not easy to accept that he had to go back all of a sudden. After all, Heath was still counting on his knight talent to be maxed out in this war. But the matter of the commander. Was there really no one to lead? Then what if? Suddenly, a strange thought appeared in Heath's mind, a thought that completely deviated from his duty. However, seeing that it was full of attributes, this thought became more and more intense. Hence, he pressed one hand on the count's corpse. Previously, because he was not sure if extracting would affect the resurrection, Heath did not carry out the extraction on Count Croya. Now that the resurrection had failed, there was naturally nothing to worry about. He thought lightly in his heart, extract. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained Machiavelli's Art of War. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained Helen Military Treatise. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained Battlefield Command. Beep, successful extraction. Knight Talent +1. Beep, successful extraction. Strength +0.03. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained White Horse Sword Technique. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained White Horse Secret Manual. It was as if something was reminding Heath of something. The results of the extraction this time were abnormally large. It was as if he had read through everything Count Croya had learned in his life. Large chunks of unfamiliar information surged into Heath's mind, causing him to close his eyes unconsciously. After a long while, his swollen mind finally calmed down. He opened his eyes again, and at this moment, there was a sharp glint in his eyes. There was some calmness, some pride, and some desire. A desire for war. Inexplicably, the knights in the hall suddenly felt that in this instant, this wizard had become somewhat different. Hwalala! It was the sound of his robe fluttering in the wind. While everyone was surprised, they saw the wizard suddenly take off his cloak and take out a black cross-shaped sword from nowhere. Then, he turned his head and said to the knights, "Find me a set of armor. I'll fight this battle." Chapter 55, Prepare for Battle. Twilight Fortress, under the city walls, the Riker Army. The commander of the Riker Army, Count Gunnar, was shuttling between the armies, making the final arrangements before the battle. "Put on your armor, grab your long swords, and follow the necromancer's army to charge forward. Do not retreat. Whoever steps back, I will chop off his head. Croya has already died under the spell of the necromancer. The rest are useless trash, livestock waiting to be slaughtered by you, and your meritorious deeds. Kill all the Helens. Their fields are yours, their property is yours, and their women and daughters are yours. Kill all the Helens! Kill all the Helens! Thunder-like shouts resounded in the sky. The morale of the Riker army had reached its peak. At the same time, on the battlements of Twilight Fortress. Walking up to the battlements, Heath adjusted the armor on his body. This was a set of Gothic armor. Although it was light armor made of leather and metal, it was very uncomfortable to wear. But there was nothing he could do. This kind of attire could make him look like a qualified military commander. The first thing you must do on the battlefield is to make yourself look like a qualified commander. This was the first sentence of the battlefield command that was extracted from Count Croya. Walking between the battlements, Heath made the final arrangements. You two stand here. If you see someone hanging a ladder, pour this bottle of magic potion on the ladder. All the arrowheads are soaked in the bucket. The arrowheads must be dipped in the magic potion. Put the magic scroll on the ground. When you hear my order, tear open the sealing wax immediately. Leave the rest to magic. Different chefs with the same ingredients could make different flavors of delicacies. The same was true for battlefield command. Although the command knowledge in Heath's mind came from Count Croya, he was not prepared to deploy it according to Count Croya's method. Instead, he combined the advantages of magic to maximize the use of magic on the battlefield. The potions and magic scrolls that he had bought in the mist market were put to use at this moment. Heath had wanted to take out these tools in the previous battle, but he did not know how to arrange them properly. He had consulted Count Croya. However, the Count could not give him an appropriate way to deploy these high-end items. The battlefield was not child's play. The current crossguard swords, arrows, and catapults had been tested in countless wars. The commander was already very familiar with their usage, so he dared to deploy them boldly. The items that Heath had given him were rarely brought to the battlefield by wizards in the past. They lacked practical tests. For example, if an earthling brought a flamethrower and a drone to the ancient battlefield, although everyone could see that these things were very powerful, how to properly use them on the battlefield was not something that could be figured out in a day. After all, who knew if the flamethrower would burn their own people before it burned their enemies to death? So, conservatively, the Count declined Heath's instruments, and they remained dusty in Heath's space pocket. But now Heath had the Count's military skills, the theory of the battlefield, and his own knowledge of the use of these instruments. It was easy to combine them and apply them to the battlefield. Woo 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 woo. The horn of the charge sounded. The enemy had begun to advance. Heath returned to the front of the formation, and his gaze swept across the soldiers on the battlements. Although his current arrangements were very professional, the terrified eyes and pale faces of the soldiers still fully demonstrated everyone's distrust of this new commander. Everyone was trembling, and their morale was incredibly low. Heath thought for a moment, then took out a cross-shaped sword and handed it to a nearby knight. Wallace, take the cross-shaped sword and guard the passage. Anyone who dares to take a step back will have their head chopped off. When I return, I'll turn his entire family into rats and feed them to the wildcats. After a series of alarmist words, Heath took out a bottle of magic potion and said, if you fight bravely, this is a wizard's magic potion. Its effect is equivalent to gold blood. I think everyone already knows its effect. The fear of the soldiers subsided slightly. Heath took out a small bag and took out a handful of gold coins. This bag contains countless gold coins. Greed flashed in the eyes of the soldiers. Heath continued to take out a small bottle, pulled out a dagger, cut a hole in his palm, and poured the magic potion. Under everyone's surprised eyes, the wound on Heath's palm healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, it had recovered to its original state. Heath shouted, "Don't be afraid, I am a wizard. Even if your limbs are cut off, even if you are covered in wounds, I can still make you whole again. I can even make you stronger. Gold coins, power, strength, women. Fighting bravely, I promise you everything you want. I am a wizard. I am a god." The soldiers' eyes were red. Heath's voice was like thunder. "Answer me. What should you do now?" "Kill. Kill. Kill." A cold killing voice sounded, and the morale of the soldiers on the city wall rose. Seeing this, Heath felt a little relieved. According to battlefield command theory, the core of battlefield command was to make the soldiers believe that he could lead them to victory. Only if they believed that, they could win. Then, he drew his sword and shouted, "In the name of wizards, kill them all! In the name of wizards, kill them all! In the name of wizards, kill them all!" On the other side, in the Shadow Tower, in the cafeteria. At the dining table, Ender was eating mashed potatoes and said in an exaggerated tone, "That madman Heath. He's really crazy. He accepted the recruitment and signed up for the battlefield. He's crazy." Jessica said disdainfully, "Haven't you always been interested in participating in the war?" Ender said loudly, "Who in their right mind would be interested in the war? Isn't it good to live? No matter how poor I am, no matter how lacking my cultivation resources, I would never go to a place like the battlefield and bet my life on magic stones. Only a madman like Heath would do that." The few apprentices at the table also agreed. "Yet, Heath is too irrational. It's not worth it to risk his life for magic stones. He has always been like this. Why wouldn't he dare to risk his life for magic stones? He even dares to provoke high-level demonized beasts. The reputation of being a magic madman is not for nothing. So, it's not unreasonable for him to cultivate fast. He can't be lucky forever. One mistake and he's dead for sure. A low-level apprentice is just cannon fodder on the battlefield. It's very likely that we will never see that magic madman again." At this moment, an apprentice ran over from the other side in a panic. It was Jenny, who entered at the same time as them. Jenny ran to the table quickly and panted nervously. Jessica could not help but ask, "What happened, Jenny?" Jenny said with a serious expression, Wesley is dead. We just received news that Wesley died in battle." Everyone was shocked. What? Although everyone knew that war was a dangerous place, they did not expect the news of the sacrifice of their fellow apprentice to come back so soon. Ender said with a gloating tone, "See, I told you this was a life and death payment, right?" Wesley had a good relationship with many witches, and some of them were very popular with Ender. At this time, Jessica suddenly thought of something. She quickly said, "Hey? Didn't Wesley go to the same battlefield as Heath?" Everyone was stunned and had different expressions. Ender sighed softly and said sympathetically, "I guess that guy is hiding in a corner now, shivering and regretting his stupid decision. I'm really sorry for him." To the apprentice's surprise, not only did Heath not regret his decision to participate in the battle, but he was also very glad that he made this decision. He had to find an adjective to describe his mood at this moment, and that was exciting. It was too exciting. Standing on the battlements, Heath raised his cross sword high and shouted at the top of his voice in high spirits, "Release the arrows." Many years later, when Heath had become one in the history books, he deliberately bought a bottle of wine and sneaked onto the battlements. While drinking, he listened to the bards below the battlements talking about the war epic with him as the main character. Recalling this interesting and extraordinary moment. Chapter 56, Defend the City. Twilight Fortress, on the battlements. Release the arrows. Fire. Shield. The gorgeous sunlight shone on Heath's silver armor, scattering patches of silver light, making him look particularly awe-inspiring. Standing on the battlefield that was filled with arrows, he methodically gave out battle orders one after another. The entire military formation on the battlements was changing according to his orders, and all the soldiers were listening to his commands. When the enemy attacked, they released their arrows. The arrows soaked in magic potions ignited balls of flames in Heath's incantation. Once the special magic potion touched the flames, it would quickly spread to the entire body. When the enemy took out their bows and arrows to fight back, the soldiers would form shields. The defensive spells cast on the ground by magic scrolls could make the shields larger and more defensible. The enemy finally hung up the ladder, but what awaited them was the dissolution potion that Heath had prepared long ago. This special corrosive liquid would corrode even metal in a short time. Only a few soldiers could climb up the battlements before the ladder rotted, so it could not pose a threat to their defense. Under the command of Heath, the entire battlements were completely guarded. "Release the arrows!" Heath roared as he swung his cross sword. On the other side, in the enemy camp. When the knights found Prit, he was in his tent enjoying the fun of life with Trish. His strong interest was interrupted, so much so that if it was not for Trish stopping him, he would have turned those knights who dared to break into his tent into toads. Only after listening to the knight's explanation did he finally calm down, because the news that the knights brought was too bizarre. He said in shock, "You mean, the wizard in the fortress walked to the battlements to defend the city? Now, the one commanding the grasshoppers to fight is the wizard?" He almost thought that his ears were out of order. Count Gunnar nodded. "Yes, my lord. Our spies in the fortress sent a message. According to him, the one defending the city is the enemy's wizard. His expression was very ugly. He had finally killed Croya, but he had never thought that a commander would appear out of nowhere. Moreover, the ability of leading the army was no less than Croya's. Thus, he could not find an opportunity to seek help from magic. Trish grabbed a blanket to cover her body and pushed Prit. "Sir Wizard, let's go and take a look first." Prit suppressed the anger in his heart, put on his cloak, and went to the front line. If he had suspected that the knight's information was wrong before, now his suspicions were gone. Looking at the silver-armored, black-haired young man on the battlements, Prit was shocked. He's really a wizard. He felt the special spiritual fluctuation of a spellcaster. At the same time, Heath on the city wall also sensed Prit under the city wall. Although he had never met him before, he was still certain that this was the enemy high-level apprentice who had cursed Count Croya to death and provoked him. He narrowed his eyes and said to his left and right, "Bring me the bow." "Yes." The knight quickly brought over a purple-clothed wooden longbow. Heath pulled the bowstring, and his entire movement was completed in one go. An arrow shot straight at the wizard on the ground. The distance between the two was close to 350 yards. An ordinary longbow archer would not be able to shoot such a long distance. However, as a high-level knight, Heath's maximum shooting range was 500 yards. However, there was a sharp whistle. The arrow drew a cold light in the air and appeared in front of Prit in the blink of an eye. "Sir, be careful." The guards' expressions changed drastically. 2 guards rushed up to help. Prit snorted in disdain. The space around him surged, and a ball of blood suddenly appeared in front of him, forming a semicircular eggshell-shaped shield that protected Prit perfectly. Just as the arrow was about to fail, the arrow suddenly exploded. "Ah! Ah!" The 2 guards who rushed over to help let out a scream. They covered their faces in pain, and white smoke rose from their faces. Prit was stunned. Only then did he notice that there were 2 glass test tubes tied under the arrows. It seemed that Heath had targeted the guards next to him from the beginning. The soldiers screamed and rolled around on the ground. Soon, they lost their breath. Prit looked at the city wall and his face darkened. At the same time, Heath put down his longbow and his gaze fell on the blood-red shield that was wrapped around Prit. He seemed to be deep in thought. An hour passed in the blink of an eye. After both sides dropped over 100 bodies, the second round of siege war ended. On the battlements, seeing the enemy retreating like a tide, the battlements broke into cheers. "Ha ha! We won! We won! Son of a, go home and eat your mother's grandmother! Long live the wizard lord! We have wizards, we have gods!" If there were still people who doubted Heath's ability, then after this battle ended, no one dared to doubt him anymore. On the city tower, the soldiers shouted Heath's name. At this moment, they had completely equated him with a god. After the battle ended, Twilight Fortress. In front of the crematorium, corpses were placed neatly on the ground. Heath stood by the side and cleared away the dark magic for these corpses as usual. Beep, extraction successful. Strength plus 0.01. Beep, extraction successful. Agility plus 0.01. Beep, extraction successful. Vitality plus 0.01. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained the complete collection of delicacies in the Kingdom of Hyran. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained the night in the garden of the debauched noblewoman and the unscrupulous bard. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained the West Coast myths and legends. Beep, extraction successful. It was unknown where the 10,000 undead troops brought by the enemy troops had come from, but they should have died not long ago. Most of the corpses were well preserved, and most of them could be extracted. There were all kinds of things extracted. Other than attributes, there were all kinds of strange knowledge. There were novels and biographies with beautiful descriptions of human nature, detailed introductions of fine food and wine, and all kinds of myths and legends. Of course, the most common ones were goat breeding techniques, black soil identification, insect disaster prevention, and so on. With one look, it was obvious that the knowledge came from the lower-class farmers. They were probably made by killing the farmers before the war started. These undead were all in their prime, and judging from the degree of decomposition of their corpses, the time of death was the same. In addition to the knowledge that was extracted from their bodies, it was not surprising for Heath to make such a judgment. This Riker dukedom. It was understandable that there was no right or wrong in war. However, killing the farmers and making them into undead to attack the city, Heath did not know how to evaluate such a method. After all, the population of Riker Duchy was only a few 100,000, and there was not much labor force in its prime. Sir Wizard. At this moment, Knight Galio walked over and bowed. Lady Witch asked me to report to you. I have already soaked the soldiers in the purifying water as you instructed. Although the curse sacrifice was sinister, it was not a particularly incurable spell. Previously, he was caught off guard. Now that he knew that the enemy had this ability, Heath naturally had to take countermeasures. After the battle ended, he combined with the remaining 2 witches to prepare purification water. This was a very low-level magic potion that could effectively isolate the sacrifice and make the curse ineffective. Heath also added some restorative materials to allow the soldiers to heal their injuries while bathing. Heath observed Galio for a while, but did not receive any mental feedback. He nodded. Sure. Galio heaved a sigh of relief, and then hammered his chest heavily. He praised in an extremely worshipping tone, Sir, it's all thanks to you this time. You saved us. You saved Twilight Fortress. If the knights at the front were only in awe of Heath, then at this moment, there was even more worship from the bottom of their hearts. The reinforcements were close at hand. They only needed to defend for one more round to win. Heath shook his head. You're welcome. Victory is our concerted effort. He should be thanking him instead. Heath glanced at the stats on his interface. After such a battle, his stats had increased quite a bit. Drib. Drop. At this moment, the crisp sound of raindrops could be heard. At some point in time, a dark cloud had gathered above the fortress. Raindrops that looked like threads slowly fell from the cloud layer. The knight asked curiously, why is it suddenly raining? It had not been the rainy season recently, and the sky had been clear just now. This rain had indeed come quite suddenly. This rain. Heath raised his head to look at the dark cloud above his head, his brows tightly knitted together. He could feel that there was some magic mixed in the rain. It was obvious that the rain had come unusually. It's not good. On the other side, in the enemy's camp, Prit staggered up from his kneeling position with the help of Trish. On the ground was an open sheepskin scroll. The magic imprint on it had disappeared without a trace, and the remaining magic flames were sizzling and burning. The pale-faced Prit wiped the sweat off his face and let out a long sigh. In just a short while, his magic power had been completely drained, and he would not be able to recover for a few days. Although it was only the activation of a spell that was fixed on the scroll, it was still an official level wizard spell. It was a little difficult for an apprentice like him to activate it. In the end, if he had not sacrificed a few nights in time, he might not have been able to complete it. But the effect is quite good. Prit looked up at the fortress in the distance. A dark cloud had already gathered above the fortress, and it was raining heavily in the fortress. The corners of his mouth curled into a sneer. Little thing, I've said it before. You're not worthy to be my opponent. The most up-to-date novellas are published on Fruit Noello. Chapter 57, Hesitation. It was night, Twilight Fortress. Quick, quick, quick. Drain the water from the storeroom. Where's the craftsman? Go and look at the right side of the city wall. A soldier just reported that there was a collapse over there. Don't let the grain soak in the water. In the pouring rain, the drenched Galio wiped the rainwater off his face while giving orders to the soldiers one by one. In the fortress, the soldiers were running back and forth, carrying food, cleaning up the accumulated water in the storehouse, and repairing the collapse. The entire fortress was in chaos. The pouring rain did not stop at dusk. The rain quickly covered the fortress and accumulated a thick layer. If the drainage was not carried out in time, all the strategic supplies would be ruined. After giving the orders, Galio returned to the main building. He reported to Heath, Sir, the water in the warehouse has been cleared temporarily. The collapse of the city wall has also been rushed to be fixed. The soldiers are cleaning up the food now. Heath nodded. Very good. Galio frowned and said, but the clearing is only temporary. If the rain continues like this, it will sooner or later flood up. Pausing for a moment, he said solemnly, furthermore, the walls on both sides of the city wall have already started to show signs of loosening. If the rain continues to come down, there is a high possibility that the city wall will collapse. Twilight Fortress belonged to a generation of arid lands, and there was very little rain all year round. Therefore, when the fortress was built, it basically did not consider the flood prevention here. The walls on both sides of the fortress had even less vegetation, and the soil was soft. Not long ago, a mine had been dug out. Normally, it would not be a big deal, but once the heavy rain fell, there was a high possibility of landslides. Now, the soil on both sides was showing signs of loosening and slipping. The entire fortress was embedded in the mountain walls. Once a landslide occurred, it was basically equivalent to the city walls collapsing. Without the protection of the city walls, fighting the undead army of 10,000 people head-on. In short, Heath and the others were in big trouble now. Galileo said, "Sir, what do you think we should do now? What should we do?" This scale was at least caused by an official grade wizard magic scroll. "What could a young apprentice like me do?" Heath said in a deep voice, "Let me think about it." It was time to make a choice again. At this time, should he run away? That night, the exhausted soldiers who were trying to save the city wall spent the night in the water. Even so, something bad happened. At dawn the next day, with a loud rumble, the mountain on the right side of the city wall slid down, crashing down the right side of the city wall. This was equivalent to fighting the enemy on the same level. Standing in front of the collapsed city wall, every soldier's eyes were filled with despair. Galileo looked at the collapse in front of him and asked Heath again, "Sir, we now?" This time, the knight's voice sounded very dry. Heath felt a headache coming on. "Let me think about it." He was not going to leave, and he was currently in a dilemma. Before Heath could make a decision, his soldiers had already handed in their answers. During lunchtime, when the knights went to take attendance, they suddenly found that there were more than a dozen soldiers missing. After some investigation, they found that these soldiers had deserted and disappeared. There would always be some. Although the knights had tried their best to stop them, they still managed to escape before sunset. Even one of the two witches sent by Shadow Tower had escaped. In fact, strictly speaking, it was understandable for these soldiers to escape. After all, they were loyal to Count Croya. Now that the Count was dead, there was naturally no reason for them to continue fighting in the castle. The witches were even more so. All spellcasters had the priority to leave the human battlefield. They could leave at any time if they encountered danger, and Heath could not stop them at all. There were only 800 people in the fortress, to begin with, and they had lost nearly 200 people in the previous two battles. Now, nearly 100 people had run away, leaving only about 500 people. On the other hand, although the enemy had lost a lot of people in the front, most of them were undead, and there was basically no lack of real living troops. There were more than 1,000 living troops, 7,000 to 8,000 undead troops, and a high-level apprentice who was holding an official-level wizard gear. The difference in strength between the two sides was unusually large. As for Heath's reinforcements, they would only arrive at sunset the next day at the earliest. The enemy's third round of attack would definitely be the next morning. Regardless of whether the high-level apprentice wizard would be able to arrive in time. Without the protection of the city wall, even if he arrived in time, he might not be able to decide the outcome. Then, it seemed that the only way left was to retreat. Standing on the city wall, Heath rubbed his temples in pain. In fact, he was not a greedy person. After farming 2 batches of attributes consecutively, this trip was definitely filled with wealth. His talent, attributes, spells, swordsmanship, and various knowledge had been absorbed by God knows how much. It had far exceeded his expectations. Even if he retreated now, it was definitely not a loss. As for the Shadow Tower, it wasn't unreasonable. Up until now, his performance had been impeccable. He couldn't be blamed for such a huge mistake in intelligence. He had already performed exceptionally well by himself. Even if he turned around and left now, there wouldn't be any criticism. It was just that. Not to mention the official-level wizard gear and the wealth of the advanced apprentices. While inheriting the military knowledge of Count Croya, he also naturally developed the professionalism of a militarist in his heart. For example, LOL. The reinforcements lasted for dozens of minutes and fought back and forth with the enemy. But now, because of a mistake, he had lost 3 towers and even crystals. Should he continue to struggle and wait for the team wave to see? Or should they just use GG? After pondering for a long time, Heath finally made a decision. Let's try again. Night, Twilight Fortress. It was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and the heavy rain was still continuing. The soldiers leaned against the city tower. This was the only place where there was no stagnant water. Everyone did not rest. Instead, they silently looked at the surrounding scenery and prayed for the coming tomorrow. Tomorrow morning, the decisive battle was about to begin. Would they fight to the death? Surrender? Or flee? Everyone felt that their future was uncertain. They did not know if they would be able to see the sunset tomorrow night. Day. 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 At this moment, the sound of footsteps could be heard. They saw a figure walking up from the stairs. It was their commander, the young wizard. 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 Everyone stood up and bowed. This wizard had proved his talent to them on the battlefield and was recognized by every soldier present. Although they lost in the end, it was because of the absolute difference in strength, not because of his command. Heath raised his hand and asked, "Is everyone here?" A knight came forward and said, "Yes, sir. There are a total of 528 soldiers. Everyone is here." Heath nodded and instructed, "All right, gather everyone together. No one is allowed to be separated. Even if they want to take a dump, at least 3 people must be accompanying them. I have something to announce in a while." He suspected that there was an enemy insider in the team. The knight said, "Yes, sir." The soldiers were gathered together. Everyone looked at Heath. They were curious about what this young commander was going to say next. Was he going to surrender? Or retreat? Day. 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 Just as everyone was puzzled, another set of footsteps sounded. They saw 2 knights carrying a big black pot walking up. The black pot was emitting thick smoke. Under the moonlight, one could vaguely see that it was a dark green liquid, emitting a strong strange smell. What was this? The soldiers all stretched their necks. Heath said, "This is the magic potion that I made. Each of you has a bowl. Give it to the soldiers to drink." Yes. The 2 knights gave the magic potion to the soldiers, and each of them drank a bowl. My eyes! Isn't it night now? Why can I see so clearly? It's incredible. The soldiers who drank the potions were surprised because they found that they could suddenly maintain their vision in the dark as if it was daytime. Yes, this was the night vision potion that Heath had bought at the auction. Other than that, he had also added some materials that could increase one's courage and excitement. Heath then instructed the knight, "Bring everything up." Yes. The 2 knights who were worthy of Heath's trust went down. After a while, they came up with 2 large sacks and poured all the things inside onto the floor. All of them were filled with armor. The armor of the soldiers of the Riker Duchy. Some of the quick-witted soldiers and knights had already realized what Heath was trying to do, and their eyes immediately widened. At the same time, Heath opened his mouth. Just as they had expected. Heath said, "I won't say any touching words, but I will grant you victory. After you win, you will have everything. The art of war, fight to the death and live to fight another day. Since we can't win a head-on fight tomorrow morning, let's make a surprise attack tonight to decide the outcome." Chapter 58, Night Attack. The main battlefield in the eastern part of the Helen Kingdom, Chopin, a great forest. The military commander of the Shadow Tower, the king of the Helen Kingdom, Philip, was patrolling the camp. The scouts will conduct a news report every 10 minutes. If there's any deviation, immediately sound the alarm. Those on night duty, keep your spirits up. Campbell may ambush us at any time. Be careful, don't let the ambush succeed. Yes, Your Majesty. Although he had received repeated assurances from the knights, Philip still had a bad premonition. Ever since they entered Chopina Forest, the main force led by Campbell had disappeared without a trace. After searching for many days, they found nothing. It was unknown what methods Campbell used. Even the magic of the wizards was ineffective. Under the urgent request of the 2 wizards, he had to split up his forces to carry out a search, which made him feel very insecure. "I hope I'm overthinking things. Dang 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 dang." Just as he thought of this, the sound of an alarm suddenly sounded outside the tent. Philip hurriedly opened the curtain and walked outside. "Fire! Put out the fire! Kill! Kill! Kill!" Outside, the flames soared into the sky, and the shouts of killing could be heard in all directions. An army had unknowingly barged into the camp. They were brandishing their crossguard swords and killing in all directions. The flames that soared into the sky lit up the entire night. Philip's face sank. Twilight Fortress, outside the city. At the same time, the same scene was playing out in Twilight Fortress. The only difference was that both the offensive and defensive sides had swapped places. Clang! 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 The awkward alarm bell suddenly sounded. Count Gunnar, who had been awakened from his sleep, put on a coat and grabbed a crossguard sword before rushing out of the tent. Kill! 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 Kill all the Rikers! Outside, the sounds of killing rang out in all directions. Flames soared into the sky, and the entire camp was in chaos. Count Gunnar's face darkened. Right at this moment, a black-haired soldier ran towards him. Count Gunnar asked hurriedly, "What happened?" The soldier answered in panic, "Sir, we've been attacked." Attacked? Count Gunnar felt incredulous. By whom? Was it that defeated soldiers from Twilight Fortress? How could they have the courage and strength to defend the fortress when they could not even defend it? He simply knew that now was not the time to dwell on this matter. He immediately made a decision. "Come in and help me put on my armor." The two squires who were supposed to be guarding the entrance of the camp had disappeared. The soldier said, "Yes." Count Gunnar immediately turned around and walked into the tent. However, before he took 2 steps, he suddenly felt an extremely strong sense of danger coming from behind. All the hair on Count Gunnar's body suddenly stood on end. As a high-level knight, his physical fitness made him roll forward reflexively. Clang! A loud and clear sound of a sword rang out. The sharp blade almost grazed past his head and pierced through the air. The sword aura that was stirred up even caused his skin to hurt. Count Gunnar broke out in a cold sweat. He retreated several meters in a row and hurriedly raised his cross sword. Helen! At this moment, he suddenly remembered that there were no black-haired soldiers in his team. Heath did not say a word. He raised his hand and threw a fireball at Count Gunnar. Wizard! Count Gunnar's expression suddenly changed. He hurriedly dodged to the side, but at this moment, an invisible force suddenly swept over and firmly held him like an invisible hand. Count Gunnar was greatly shocked and hurriedly used all his strength to try to break free from this force. But at this moment, Heath suddenly shouted, "Shine!" With his voice, the cross sword in his hand suddenly burst out with an extremely dazzling light. Facing this light, Count Gunnar only felt a pain in his eyes. Although it happened suddenly, the instinct of a senior knight still made him endure the pain in his eyes and try his best to break free from the power in front of him. The fireball grazed past his face once again. Count Gunnar only felt a burst of pain on his face and lost consciousness. His face was swept by the fireball, and half of his face was torn apart. The flesh and blood flying around were extremely terrifying. Without thinking too much, Count Gunnar quickly retreated with his eyes closed. He only wanted to retreat from the tent and call for the guards. But at this moment, whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of a cold wind breaking could be heard. Heath, who was chasing after him, suddenly sped up at an incredible speed and appeared in front of Count Gunnar in an instant. Spell, Gale! This sudden burst of speed caught Count Gunnar off guard. He only felt a pain in his chest. When he opened his eyes with difficulty, what he saw was a cross-shaped sword inserted into his heart and lungs. Count Gunnar widened his eyes. You! Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of rushing wind rang out again. Count Gunnar only felt a chill on his neck, and then he felt the world spinning. The last thing he saw was the black-haired soldier was using a white handkerchief to wipe the bloodstains on the cross-shaped sword. Thump! With a soft sound, Count Gunnar's head rolled to the ground, and then his headless body fell forward with a plop. He's finally dead. Seeing the fallen body, Heath let out a long sigh of relief. It had to be said that the enemy commander had some strength. He had used so many spells to be ambushed by him, yet he could still resist for so long. If it was a head-on battle, it would not be easy to kill him. Then, Heath squatted down and pressed a hand on the Count's chest, chanting in his heart, "Extract." Beep, successful extraction. Knight talent +1. Beep, successful extraction. Strength +0.02. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained blood cross sword technique. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained blood battle chi. At this point, Heath's knight talent had reached 9 points, which meant that he had the highest knight talent, achieving the goal he had set for himself before joining the battle. Along with the other gains he had obtained from the extraction, he had already made a huge profit. It had to be said that this trip had been unbelievably smooth. Although Heath had calculated before the sneak attack that there was a high probability that the enemy army would let down their guard, letting him succeed so easily was still out of his expectations. He did not know where the enemy knights had gone. There were only a few apprentice knights leading a team to keep watch. These weak and inexperienced fools did not even realize that there was an invasion until the soldiers on the arrow tower were shot to death. Heath and his men easily rushed in. It's not the time to be happy. There's still that wizard. Thinking of this, Heath put away the slack in his heart and his heart tensed up again. This world was a magical world. The outcome of the war was always determined by magic. As long as the enemy's high-level apprentice was still there was a possibility of turning the tide. With this in mind, Heath quickly left the tent to look for the enemy's apprentice wizard. With the unique spiritual connection between spellcasters, he easily found the enemy's high-level apprentice in a corner of the camp. After arriving here, Heath could not help but be stunned by the scene in front of him. Chapter 59, Bloody Night. This was a large and wide sheepskin tent. There were a few corpses scattered around the tent. Half of the tent had been opened, revealing the scene under the tent. Inside was a large soft bed. A man and a woman were lying naked on the bed. From the spiritual sense, it was determined that the man was the enemy's apprentice wizard. Galio and a few knights had surrounded the place, raising their cross-guard swords as if they were ready to charge at any moment. The man on the bed was shocked and angry. He roared in anger, "You bunch of damn bugs! How dare you offend a noble wizard? If you dare to take another step forward, I swear, I will rot your bodies and torture your souls." The man's words obviously had a great impact. The knights around them were hesitant and worried. They didn't dare to step forward. What happened? Heath walked over at this moment. Galio bowed as if he had been pardoned. "Sir Wizard." After a pause, he said to Heath carefully, "I heard from the soldiers that this should be the wizard of the enemy." Heath nodded and said, "Leave this to me. You guys go and organize the attack. The enemy's commander has just been killed by me. Take his head and ask the soldiers here to surrender." "Yes." Hearing Heath's words, the face of the woman next to the male wizard suddenly changed. She hurriedly said to the male wizard, "Sir Wizard, we can't let them leave here. We have to control the situation quickly." The male wizard's expression was fierce, but he did not say anything. Seeing this scene, Heath could not help but squint his eyes, his expression thoughtful. The knights quickly left. Heath stood where he was, but he did not rashly step forward. Instead, he sized up the man in front of him. He could not help but be stunned when he saw this. Isn't this the male wizard from the auction?" He swept his gaze around and indeed, he found a white bone staff with a skull on it not far away. It was the official level wizard tool necromancer's staff from the auction. So that's how it is. After fighting for so long, it's this guy. Fate is really playing tricks on people. Just as Heath was stunned, the male wizard spoke. He angrily shouted at Heath, "You damned, lowly little apprentice! After eating a bear's heart and leopard's guts, you actually dared to offend me, Prit! Do you think that with your low-level apprentice's magic power, you're worthy of being my enemy?" Heath returned to his thoughts. He narrowed his eyes and suddenly said meaningfully, "If it was a head-on confrontation, of course, I'm not confident that I could win against you. But now, I think you're not in a good state, right?" Prit's eyebrows unconsciously twitched. Heath did not say anything. He raised his hand and threw a fireball at Prit. Prit's face turned pale. He quickly raised his hand and the blood-red shield that he had seen on the battlefield appeared before him. Boom! The fireball exploded on the shield into a sky full of sparks. Although the fireball was blocked, Prit's body also shook heavily. His face turned pale involuntarily, and he looked completely dispirited. The blood-red shield that he was controlling suddenly became much dimmer. Seeing that, Heath's eyes lit up. This was because he had judged Prit's current situation with one glance. This guy had no magic power. After careful calculation, he had previously controlled the undead army and summoned a torrential rain. All of them were official-level spells. With his advanced apprentice's ability to cast spells of this level, it was only natural that his magic power would be drained. Now, he was afraid that only a little of his remaining magic power could maintain the defensive spells. What good luck! There was nothing more to say. Wizards were certainly terrifying, but wizards who could not cast spells were not much stronger than ordinary people. However, to play it safe, Heath did not rush forward rashly. Instead, he used Fireball and Wizard's Hand to attack Prit from a distance. After doing this several times, the blood shield in front of Prit could not hold on any longer and exploded into a pool of blood. Following the collapse of the blood shield, Prit also suffered great mental damage. His face turned pale and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He collapsed on the bed, looking like he had fainted. Heath was still on guard and did not rush forward. Instead, he grabbed a crossguard sword with Wizard's hand and shot it in that direction. Just as the crossguard sword was about to reach him, a cloud of black smoke suddenly rose from the body of a corpse on the ground, and then it exploded with a bang. Like an exploding grenade, the pieces of the corpse, mixed with flesh and blood, suddenly erupted. The powerful waves sent the flying crossguard sword flying. A huge pit with a diameter of 2 to 3 meters had already appeared on the spot. Seeing this scene, Heath could not help but curse in a low voice, "Despicable move. Truly sinister." With such a powerful power, if he had recklessly walked forward just now, even with the protection of the mimicry shield, he would have suffered quite a lot of damage. Fortunately, this spell seemed to be Prit's limit. After using it, his whole body shook violently. He lay on the bed weakly, unable to move any more. Heath raised his hands. Clang! Clang! The cold sound of metal interweaving rang out. Several crossguard swords scattered on the ground slowly flew into the air. The sharp edge of the swords scattered waves of bright cold light under the flickering flames, shooting straight into the hearts of people who felt a chill. Prit was finally afraid. He hurriedly said, Don't kill me." His face was as pale as paper, and he said in panic, You can't kill me. I'm a member of the Osland family. If you kill me, my family will not let you go." Prit's words did indeed cause Heath to have a moment of hesitation. But at this moment, he suddenly saw Prit's gaze. An extremely vicious gaze. So. This was the only way. Heath waved his right hand down. Whoosh! 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 A series of uneasy rushing wind sounds rang out. The flying cross swords shot towards Prit on the bed from all directions. Pu! 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 The sound of metal cutting into flesh rang out one after another. Several cross swords pierced through Prit's heart, lungs, limbs, and torso, pinning him firmly to the bed. Prit's eyes were wide open, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. It was as if he could not believe that Heath would actually dare to kill him. He opened his mouth. You. Before he could finish his sentence, his head tilted to the side, and there was no sound. The woman sitting next to Prit was stunned. Her blood-covered face was completely filled with terror. Ah! Her face turned pale, and she let out an ear-piercing scream. At this point, the picture of the war drew a curtain under the night sky. Amid the soaring flames, the panicked Riker soldiers ran back and forth. Some had just rushed out of the tent, and they were still naked. Some were holding their weapons in a panic, and they were trembling as they looked for their commander. Some had already lost their will to fight, and they were squatting on the ground with their hands over their heads, wailing loudly. The sounds of killing, weapons clashing, screams, and women's screams resounded through the air. Tonight. It was destined to be a sleepless night. Chapter 60, Reinforcements. Heath walked forward and placed one hand on the corpse. Extraction. Beep, extraction successful. Spiritual power plus 0.1. Beep, extraction successful. Obtain spell model Red Devil's Blood. Beep, extraction successful. Obtain spell knowledge detailed explanation of the Red Devil's Blood demon cells. Beep, extraction successful. Obtained necromancy basics. 2 sets of knowledge, 1 spell model, and a whole 0.1 of spiritual power. All at once, Heath had eaten his fill. However, this was only a fraction of the harvest from this trip. Immediately, Heath's gaze fell on the necromancer's staff scattered over there. An official grade wizard tool. Heath's eyes instantly lit up. This was 2 million magic stones. A man without wealth will not be rich, and a horse without night grass will not be fat. This saying is indeed correct. With excitement in his heart, Heath walked towards the necromancer's staff. However, he did not rashly pick up the treasure in front of him. Instead, he first spread out his spiritual power to scan the surroundings. After confirming that there was no hidden traps on it, he stretched out his hand to pick up the staff. Then, he immediately stretched out his mind tentacle in an attempt to establish a connection with the staff. However, he was obstructed here. The staff already had the mind imprint left behind by Prit. It was within his expectations. After all, this was something that every wizard would do. Then, Heath silently chanted in his heart, extraction. Beep, extraction failed. As expected, it did not work. Just like the spell model, most of the wizard tools had anti-theft spells on them. Unless they left their own spiritual imprint, they would not be able to see the runic structure of the wizard tools. The reason why Heath had succeeded in extracting the first 2 times was mainly because the 2 wizard tools had been damaged, and the anti-theft spells on them had lost their effects. If it can't be done, then it can't be done. I'll go back and slowly crack it. Shaking his head, Heath put the official level wizard tool back into his dimensional pocket. At noon the next day, the official apprentice sent by Shadow Tower arrived at the battlefield, along with the remaining 6 reinforcement apprentices. Under the collapsed walls of the blood-red fortress, the advanced apprentice Glenn looked ahead with shock in his eyes. In the open space in front of him were more than 1,000 soldiers of Riker Duchy. They had removed their armor and bound their hands, and they were tied up on the ground like chickens waiting to be slaughtered. Glenn rubbed his eyes and asked Heath, "Apprentice Heath, did you do all this?" He had heard about the battle situation before coming here. He had already given up hope for Twilight Fortress. But he had never thought that there would be such a shocking reversal. The Knight Galio who stood next to him puffed out his chest and said proudly, "Sir Wizard is the most outstanding commander I have ever seen." No matter how much he did not believe it, Glenn could only accept this fact. He praised, "Apprentice Heath, your outstanding performance is extraordinary. I will report everything that happened here to the Shadow Tower truthfully. I'm afraid no apprentice can compare to your great achievements." After a pause, there was less arrogance in his eyes and more friendliness. He smiled and said, "It's almost time for Wizard Slater to recruit students. I think it won't be long before you become one of us." Heath said humbly, "Thank you." Patter. Patter. At this moment, the sound of wings flapping came from the sky. A raven flew from the sky. Glenn crossed his arms in front of him, and the flying raven landed on his arm. Then it came close to his ear and covered it with its wings, saying something unknown. Heath clearly saw that Glenn's eyebrows were tightly knitted. Soon, the raven flew away. Heath could not help but ask, "What happened, Apprentice Glenn?" Glenn's face showed a bitter smile. "We lost." The knight next to him was shocked. "What?" Galio asked in disbelief, "Sir Wizard, are you telling the truth? How? How is this possible?" The army of Riker Duchy was being held here by them. The kingdom only needed to deal with more than 3,000 people from the kingdom of Jed. No matter how they counted, they should not lose. One had to know that their main force was more than 10,000 people. Glenn nodded and sighed softly. "It's absolutely true." Immediately, everyone understood the whole story from Glenn. The main force led by the Kingdom of Helen was led by the Kingdom of Cedric into a lush forest at the intersection of the 2 countries, the Great Forest of Chapena. Then, the commander of the Kingdom of Cedric used some unknown method to hide the army in the forest. They could not find the army of the Kingdom of Cedric, so the 2 wizards who followed the army put pressure on the king of the Kingdom of Helen, Philip. In the end, Philip had to split up to find the army of the Kingdom of Cedric. After they split up, the kingdom's army suddenly appeared and attacked the Helen kingdom's army one after another. The army of more than 10,000 people was defeated by the Kingdom of Helen one by one. After listening to Glenn's explanation, everyone present had ugly expressions on their faces. They never thought that this would be the end result. Heath asked, "Then what is the plan of the tower now?" Although the main force led by the Kingdom of Helen had suffered a crushing defeat, in the end, this was only part of the power under the Shadow Tower. An army like this, Shadow Tower could regroup at any time, or have it even larger and stronger. In addition, up to now, only the battlefield of mortals had been defeated, but this was not a world where mortals could decide the outcome. In the end, the final victory or defeat still had to be decided in the hands of the wizards. Glenn said, "The Red Devil's blood has proposed to us the Holy Judgment." Heath was startled. Holy Judgment? The Holy Judgment was a tradition in the wizard world. When 2 wizard organizations could not decide the outcome of the battle, they could propose a direct decisive battle with the same number of people and the same strength, and the right and wrong would be decided by this decisive battle. Heath asked, "What does the tower mean?" Glenn shook his head and said, "We can't refuse. The army of Red Devil's blood has already passed through the White River Pass. If we refuse, the entire population of almost 1 million people in the 3 countries Helen, Con, and Flynn will be slaughtered by them. The tower cannot accept such a loss." Heath suddenly understood. It was a classic case of better to die than to be destroyed. It was impossible to defeat the Shadow Tower on the battlefield with the power of the Red Devil's blood alone. However, if they had the mentality of dying together with the Shadow Tower, it would indeed cause a considerable loss to the Shadow Tower. Especially now that they had already entered the hinterland of the Helen Kingdom. If they were to recklessly kill without caring about anything and turn the entire Helen Kingdom into a living hell, the Shadow Tower really wouldn't be able to do anything to them. One had to know that the hinterland of the Helen Kingdom was now at the level of being undefended. Now that he thought about it, the strategic goal they had set from the very beginning was probably to use this as blackmail to carry out the holy judgment with the Shadow Tower. Glenn then asked, "How is it? Apprentice Heath, are you interested in watching the battle?" Chapter 61, Final Battle. A few days later, at the intersection of the Kingdom of Helen and the Kingdom of Jed, on the ruling plains. On the hillside on the side of the ruling plains. Heath and the apprentices of the Shadow Tower stood here, looking down at the plains below. At this time, 2 square formations had been set up on the plains below, each of which had a population of 1,000 people, including 10 knights and 1 official level wizard. In a while, the 2 sides would start a battle on the plains, deciding the outcome of this battle. At this moment, all the representatives of the wizard organizations in the Underdark Treesia had arrived to witness this battle. Time flew by, and soon, the agreed time for the start of the battle arrived at noon. The first to act was the Shadow Tower's side. The wizard in charge of this battle, Slater, walked forward and raised his hand. Immediately. Whoosh! Whoosh! The sound of the wind exploded. A gust of strong wind suddenly swept over from all directions, quickly forming a huge grey-black cloud in the sky. The dark clouds rolled, and fine lightning surged out from within. Rumble! A loud sound was heard. An incomparably huge bolt of lightning struck down from the sky and charged straight towards the army formation of the Kingdom of Jed. On the other side, the wizard from the blood of Red Devil's blood also moved. It was a white-bearded old man holding a long 2-handed magic staff in his hand. He raised the magic staff in his hand high and then slammed it heavily onto the ground. A blood-red shield appeared above the heads of the soldiers. It was exactly the same as what Prit had summoned before, but the area was more than 100 times larger. It covered the entire army formation, like a floating red curtain. Boom! Lightning struck the huge blood-red curtain, and the blood-red curtain trembled violently. The war had also begun at this moment. Kill! 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 A cold battle cry rang out, and the soldiers of both sides raised their weapons and rushed towards each other. In the next moment, 2 torrents crashed into each other. At the same time, the battle between the wizards was still ongoing. After the lightning was blocked, Wizard Slater raised his right hand. As he moved, the sand on the ground immediately rolled over. It was swept up into the air by the strong wind and soon formed a huge meteorite with a diameter of more than 10 meters in the air. As Wizard Slater waved his right hand downwards. Rumble! The huge meteorite directly hit the blood-red curtain below. The white-bearded old man quickly raised his staff and pointed at the meteorite, shouting loudly, "That day, that earth, that time. If God says it's forbidden, then stop everything in the world." Following his voice, the meteorite stopped in mid-air. But then, Wizard Slater also spoke. His voice was not loud, but it carried an unquestionable majesty. "Time is like water. It's gone without a trace. Only one voice is allowed in this world." The meteorite shook violently, and then began to slowly sink. The white-bearded old man's body shook violently, and he took 2 steps back. He gritted his teeth and blurted out a short incantation. With this incantation, his hair and beard turned blood-red at a speed visible to the naked eye. As the color changed, the old man's aura also rose a lot. Heath had extracted Prit's knowledge and knew that this was the largest spell in the wizard organization of Red Devil's blood. Its name was Red Devil's blood. This was a spell with a beneficial nature, and it could greatly increase one's strength in a short period of time. As the old man's spell was released, the falling meteor in the sky stopped and began to fall apart. But at this moment, Wizard Slater suddenly took out a magic book with a black cover. He opened the magic book and quickly drew a few pictures on it. Crash! The pages in the book suddenly began to flip rapidly. More than 10 pages left the book and were swept up into the air by the strong wind. Then, they burned into fireballs one after another. Every fireball was the size of a meteorite, and their momentum was extremely terrifying. Under this terrifying might, the chaotic battlefield suddenly stopped. The soldiers of both sides actually stopped fighting. Everyone looked at the fireballs in the sky in horror, as if doomsday was coming. Then, Wizard Slater raised his hand and slashed downwards. Rumble! Immediately, the fireballs pounced towards the blood-colored curtain and exploded on it one by one. The first one. The old man's body shook. The second one. The old man spat out a mouthful of blood. Third. The blood-colored curtain shattered with a loud bang. The fireballs that had lost their protection bombarded the ground one after another, and the entire battlefield instantly turned into a sea of fire. Miserable cries continued to be heard, and the soldiers that had turned into fireballs rushed back and forth. They did not differentiate between friend and foe. The old man raised the back of his hand and wiped the blood at the corner of his mouth. Slater! I'll remember you. Shadow Tower, sooner or later, you'll all suffer the consequences of your actions. Another wizard, Wizard Davide, who was standing outside the battlefield, saw this and hurriedly shouted, Slater, he's going to escape. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man suddenly took out a red feather. Bang! The feather burned into a ball of flame and quickly engulfed the old man's entire body, causing his entire body to burn into a ball of flame. Then, with a pu sound, the old man disappeared. Only a layer of dust was left on the spot, as if the old man had been burned into ashes. Glenn, the advanced apprentice standing next to Heath, opened his mouth and said, the warping feather. Carlos can actually get such a thing. No wonder he has nothing to fear. Warping feather? Heath was stunned after listening to Glenn's explanation. He had seen this feather in the information in the library. It was said that it came from a very advanced space-type demonized creature. This kind of demonized creature controlled the power of space, so their feathers also had a strange power of space. Wizards could use them to teleport over a long distance. This is a good thing for survival. Heath silently noted that he would definitely prepare one for himself in the future. With the old man's departure, the battle on the battlefield came to an end. Wizard Slater said, either you die or surrender. The Jed soldiers on the battlefield looked at each other. Then, clang! A soldier threw away the weapon in his hand. If there was one, there would be two. Then there was a second soldier, then a third soldier. Surrender! We surrender! The soldiers threw away their weapons one after another and chose to surrender. Even the enemy knights lost their will to fight and threw away their cross swords dejectedly. Outside the battlefield, Princess Trish, who was tied up like a slave by a hemp rope, sat limply on the ground. Her eyes were filled with despair. At this moment, don't surrender! A knight suddenly exploded. His eyes were red and he was hysterical. He grabbed the lapels of a soldier and said, don't surrender! I order you to fight! Fight for me! Fight to the death! The soldiers avoided his gaze and were terrified. The knight said furiously, have you forgotten the oath you made to Her Highness? Where is your loyalty? Her Highness is still in the hands of the enemy. You don't want to save her but want to surrender? What kind of knights are you? He pointed his sword at Slater. You, I want to fight to the death with you. I will defeat you. Slater's expression was contemptuous. He did not say a word. He just waved his hand in that direction. Whoosh! Whoosh! A gust of strong wind whistled over. It had already created a tornado on the ground and was sweeping towards the knight. There was no room for resistance at all. The knight was instantly swept high into the air by the tornado, falling into the forest where no one knew if he was dead or alive. Then, Slater slowly floated in the air. He looked down from above and used a condescending gaze to scan the witnesses outside the arena. These were all from various wizard organizations in the Underdark Trezia. There were wizards and apprentices. He asked, who else is unconvinced? Everyone avoided his gaze and lowered their heads. Slater finally said, remember, there is only one ruler in the Underdark Trezia, and that ruler is the Shadow Tower. Chapter 62, Return. The war that had lasted for nearly 2 months had come to an end. The Shadow Tower had won. This was an outcome that was not unexpected. After all, the difference in strength between the two sides was not small. The fact that Red Devil's blood could fight to this extent was already beyond many people's expectations. After the war ended, it was time to deal with Red Devil's blood. The master of Red Devil's blood, Carlos, was marked as a dark wizard and was wanted in the entire Underdark Trezia. Other than 2 of his 7 students who died in battle, the rest were treated the same as him. The remaining dozens of unofficial apprentices, the wizards of Red Devil's blood, and the 2 human kingdoms under its rule were all merged into the Shadow Tower. Most of these resources were distributed to the two wizards, Slater and Dovey, who were participating in the war. In addition, the official apprentices and unofficial apprentices who participated in the war received different rewards according to their merits. The war was over. The Shadow Tower once again told everyone on this land who was the real ruler of this place. Once again, it proved to everyone. The people here could only live in the shadows. Half a month later, in the Shadow Tower. In the morning. Dong! 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 The morning bell rang. The apprentices woke up one after another from their sleep, rubbed their sleepy eyes, put on their cloaks, and yawned as they began a new day. At the same time, in Heath's room. In the bedroom, Heath was sitting on a stool, meditating with his eyes closed. Beep! Elemental extraction successful. Spiritual power increased. Beep! Elemental extraction successful. Spiritual power increased. Every morning, before the sun rose, he would wake up on time to meditate. This continued until the morning bell rang. This had become a part of his life, as inseparable as eating and sleeping. Hearing the bell, Heath finished his meditation on time and slowly opened his eyes. He stretched and praised, "It's so comfortable to meditate in the tower." Although the meditation candles provided by the tower could also increase the element content in the room, it was still incomparable to the place where an elemental fountain like the Shadow Tower was located. The elements in this world were not constant. Instead, they kept gushing out like spring water and then spreading out in the surroundings. The area where the elements were gushing out was also known as the area where the elemental fountain was located. The quality of the elemental fountains varied, and the fountain where the Shadow Tower was located was already the fountain with the highest concentration of elements in the entire Underdark Tresia. Heath habitually glanced at the spirit value on the attribute pane. Spirit, 7.6. Before leaving the tower, Heath's spirit had just passed 6, and now it had reached 7.6. In other words, in just half a year's time, he had increased his spirit by 1.6. It had to be known that the path of wizards was more difficult to increase one's spirit power as time went by. An average intermediate apprentice who could increase one's spirit power by 1 point in a few years was already considered talented. Someone like Heath who was so efficient could not be described as just a genius. Perhaps only the descendants of the wizard families with countless resources would be able to achieve such efficiency. The 8th rune should be able to be meditated within these 2 days. At this rate, advancing to an advanced apprentice within 3 years shouldn't be a problem. Heath calculated silently. Following that, he raised his right hand and drew a rune in front of him. At the same time, he chanted a short syllable. Immediately, a strange symbol suddenly appeared on his forehead, flickering with a light blue light. This symbol seemed to have some kind of extremely strong suction force. The moment it lit up, the elements around Heath immediately surged towards that symbol, causing Heath's spiritual power to rapidly decrease at a speed visible to the naked eye. The system interface was even more intuitive to be able to see this change. 7.6. 6.3. 5.1. Heath's spiritual power was rapidly decreasing, and his strength was unexpectedly regressing. The suction force only lasted for about 10 seconds before it stopped. The light blue symbol on his forehead flickered a few times before it disappeared into Heath's forehead. At the same time, Heath's spiritual power also stopped decreasing. Spiritual power, 4.8. His spiritual power finally stopped at 4.8, which was the level of an ordinary low-level apprentice. Then, Heath took out a crystal ball to test his spiritual power from his dimensional pocket. He bought it in the market. It was not expensive, but it was expensive because of the cost of using it. Each test cost 1 magic stone. He put in magic stones and tested it for himself. The test result was exactly the same as what he had found through the system. Heath nodded in satisfaction. As expected of the magic of the ceiling tower. Now I don't have to worry about being exposed during the test later. The mandatory mission for this batch of apprentices had been announced. The tower would give them a rating, and before the rating, there would be a spiritual power test. This was an important test related to the final mission rating. Immediately, Heath put on his cloak and left the bedroom. He first went to the cafeteria to eat breakfast, then went to the second classroom, where today's test would be conducted. It was still early, and there were only a few apprentices in the classroom. So Heath took out a book from his dimensional pocket, randomly found a corner, and quietly read it. Not long after, apprentices began to walk into the classroom one after another. Although Heath was only sitting in an inconspicuous corner, there were still apprentices who recognized his identity through his rare black hair. All of a sudden, everyone began to discuss. Look over there, isn't that him? The magic genius, black-haired Heath. It's really him. When did he return? It should be yesterday. The apprentices who participated in yesterday's battle all returned. He should have returned at that time. Is the legend true? Did he really lead the battle at the front line? And he even turned the tide. The notice has already been released. How could it be fake? I can't believe that there is such a pervert in the world. It's fine if his magic is outstanding, but he still has time to learn other things. What an enviable talent. This time's rating, he'll definitely get 7 stones. And there'll definitely be a red one. I wonder what kind of reward the wizards will give him. I heard that Wizard Slater might take in a student in the next 2 years. It might be him. It shouldn't be, an official apprentice. As the war ended, Heath's outstanding performance on the battlefield was transmitted back to the tower through various channels, instantly causing a huge uproar among the apprentices. The wizard world was a world full of battles, and because of that, the wizards would look at the apprentices with outstanding combat strength in a different light. Personally going to the front line to fight with the enemy, and after the commander of the army died, he took over the responsibility of commanding the army to defend the city. In the end, even when the city wall was destroyed, he could still seize the opportunity to take the initiative to attack and turn the tide. Heath's various performances had long become a legend that the apprentices rushed to praise. He was definitely the most popular apprentice in the entire tower. Heath! At this moment, a loud shout sounded not far away. Heath looked over and saw a few familiar figures walking over from that side. Chapter 63, Farewell. Walking over were Heath's fellow apprentices, Ender, Jessica, Jenny, and others. There were many empty seats in the classroom at the moment, and the seats were even better. However, the few of them still went straight to the cramped corner where Heath was. Ender sat down at the side, put his arm around Heath's shoulder, and teased, "You bastard, we thought you were going to die on the battlefield. We didn't expect you to create a legend." Jessica smiled. "Great hero, welcome back. Long time no see, Heath. It's incredible. Can you tell us about the battlefield? How did you do it? Do you know military commands?" Everyone greeted Heath with envious and admiring smiles. They were asking questions like curious babies. Seeing this, Heath could only put away his book and deal with it. "Have you forgotten? Before I became a wizard, I was still a knight. How to lead soldiers in battle is a compulsory course for knights. It's mainly due to my good luck. I'm very lucky." Heath was not a proud person. Most of the time, he was alone because he had too many secrets and needed to hide them. If other people took the initiative to approach him, he would naturally not reject them. He still needed to participate in normal social activities. Even wizards could not have few friends, right? Seeing this scene, the surrounding apprentices could not help but envy Ender and the others. After all, having such a dazzling and genius-like friend was a dream for anyone. It was definitely something that could be flaunted to others with an opening line like "I have a friend," no matter where they went. After everyone chatted for a short while, a shout suddenly came from the classroom door. "The wizard is here." The apprentices returned to silence one after another. Heath and the others also made an agreement to drink afternoon tea together and stopped chatting. Da-da-da. Not long after, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Then, a figure walked into the classroom. She had a big aquiline nose, a hunchbacked figure, a pointy top hat, and haggard grey hair. She was Witch Cassandra, who had passed down the inheritance for everyone when they first entered the tower. The girl from before was still following beside her. Cassandra came to the podium and said casually, "Good morning, apprentices." Everyone bowed. "Good morning, wizard." Cassandra nodded, then glanced around the hall, and suddenly asked, "I heard that there is an apprentice named Heath here, right? Stand up for me to see." Her tone was slow and long-winded, which was very consistent with her old hag image. The apprentices' eyes immediately focused on Heath, who was in the corner. Their expressions were filled with envy and jealousy. Under everyone's gaze, Heath stood up. He bowed in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. "Witch Cassandra." After seeing Heath, Cassandra smiled, revealing a missing front tooth. "I remember you, child. Your 1.6 innate spiritual power left a very deep impression on me. Long time no see." Heath said, "Thank you. Long time no see." The wizards were all very busy. This was the second time Heath had seen this old witch since the test when he first joined the tower. Cassandra continued, "Recently, everyone has been talking about you, child, including several wizards. They are all saying that the Shadow Tower has produced a genius who is both civil and military. He has been in the tower for less than a year and already has the strength of a low-level apprentice. He can even lead an army on the battlefield and beat the enemies until they pissed their pants." She asked, "I heard that there was even a high-level apprentice who died at your hands. Is that true?" Heath said, "When I found him, he was already exhausted." The envy in the eyes of the apprentices became even more intense. "No way, the legend is true. Heath really killed the high-level apprentice. Then the official wizard tool is also. My god, why didn't I sign up for the battle? I'm so stupid." Cassandra said noncommittally, "Luck is also a part of strength. Besides, I've heard all about it. If it weren't for your persistence, that kid from the Osland family wouldn't have used up all his spiritual power in order to break through the city wall." Hearing Cassandra's words, the apprentices were stunned and looked a little strange. The Osland family? The high-level apprentice that Heath defeated is from the Osland family. He's too bold. The Osland family was a very famous wizard family on the west coast. Their power was intertwined and involved a lot. As if she heard everyone's discussion, Cassandra consoled, "There's no need to be on tenterhooks. Life and death on the battlefield depend on fate. This is written in the Code of Darkness. It's the rules. Even if the Shadow Tower is gone, no one in this land will retaliate against you because of the war." Hearing which Cassandra's words, Heath's eyebrows slightly relaxed. He had read the chronicles of the wizard families in the library and knew that these wizard families all had extremely powerful powers in the wizard world. Because of this, after killing Prit, it was impossible for him to say that he did not have any misgivings. Now that he had received the assurance of which Cassandra, the stone in his heart finally fell to the ground. He quickly said, "Thank you." Cassandra waved her hand and said, "This is the rule that everyone agreed on. There's no need to thank me." After a pause, she ended the topic. "All right, let's end the small talk here. The time of the wizards cannot be wasted like this." Then, she cut to the main topic of the day. "I came here today to accept the arrangement of the tower to test your spiritual power. Why don't we start with you, Apprentice Heath? Come here, let me see how much your spiritual power has grown in the past year and a half." Heath walked up and answered, "Yes." Just like before, the female apprentice next to him put the crystal ball on the table and lifted the black cloth covering it. Which Cassandra said, "All right, put your hands on it." Heath did as he was told. A familiar elemental reaction came from the palm of his hand. He felt some elements in his body enter the crystal ball in front of him through his palm. A cloud of smoke rose slowly in the crystal ball and quickly evolved into numbers. At this moment, the apprentices all stretched their necks and widened their eyes, focusing on the crystal ball on the table. All kinds of whispers came one after another. "Guess how much his spiritual power has reached? I think it's at least 3.6. 3.6? You're underestimating a magic madman. I think it's at least 3.8, or even 4.0. 4.0? How is that possible? Unless he really doesn't eat or drink, and spends all the magic stones he earns on cultivation resources. Don't underestimate a magic maniac. He can do such a thing." While everyone was discussing, the numbers in the crystal ball finally solidified. When they saw the final number, the entire classroom instantly exploded. 4.8. 4.8. His spiritual power actually reached 4.8. Chapter 64, Rating. No way. Is this a pervert? 4.8 points of spiritual power. How long has it been? This is too scary. Oh my god, how did this guy do it? My spiritual power has just reached 2 points and he's already at 4.8 points. Did we come in together? At least you're still on 2 points. I'm only at 1.6 points. The entire classroom was in an uproar. What did 4.8 points of spiritual power mean? If one's spiritual power exceeded 6 points, it would mean that one would advance to an intermediate apprentice. 4.8 points of spiritual power also meant that one would advance to the intermediate and advanced stage of low-level apprentice. One had to know that it was less than 2 years since they joined the Shadow Tower. Cassandra also nodded her head in satisfaction and praised, "Very good. You can reach 4.8 spiritual power in less than 2 years. I can see that you've worked hard. If you can keep it up, it's very possible for you to become a middle-level apprentice in 3 years. Her light words once again caused a stir in the classroom. To become a middle-level apprentice in 3 years. Tisk tisk, doesn't that mean that he can become a middle-level apprentice in 5 years? Are you serious? Even those wizard families can't do it. Cassandra smiled and asked Heath, Hee, it's not easy to get up early and go to bed late, right? Heath shrugged. I'm used to it. Cassandra's eyes were filled with admiration. It's a very noble quality. Many wizards believe in the theory of fate and bloodline. They think that everything is fated. They think that without outstanding talent and bloodline, one can't become an outstanding wizard. However, if you look at history, you will find that although there are very few wizards who have climbed up from the grassroots, there are still some. They don't have noble bloodlines or outstanding talent, but in the end, they can make a name for themselves and be worshipped by other wizards. Some of them even became the founders of the wizard world. They have nothing and cannot rely on anyone. The reason why they can have those supreme achievements is because of themselves and their hard work. Which Cassandra said earnestly, keep your heart well, and don't forget your original intention. The wizarding world is a place full of miracles. Talent and bloodline are not the only way out. Heath bowed seriously and said, thank you for your teachings. Cassandra smiled and said, what a polite little guy. It's a pity that I don't accept male apprentices as my students. Otherwise, a child like you would definitely be liked by others. Heath said, that's really a pity. In fact, he had a pretty good impression of this witch Cassandra. Witch Cassandra continued, all right, now it's time to give you a rating for your mission. Let me see what you've done. She took out a letter and opened it. You found the lair of the forest banshee and defeated it, relieving the trouble in Riiden City. You participated in the war. You defended the city, helped the humans destroy the enemy's catapults, killed the commander of the enemy's knights, and took over the responsibility of leading the army to defend the city after the commander died. Which Cassandra counted Heath's great achievements in detail and praised him again. Look, this little guy actually did so much. Even I don't think I can perform as well as you. Should he get the stones? Of course he should. How many will he get? Let's guess. The female apprentice beside him handed over 7 letters. Each letter had a name. They were 7 official apprentices from the tower. They were responsible for grading the apprentices. Cassandra tore open the first envelope and the envelope shook on the table. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the envelope's seal, confirming their breathing. Soon, with a click, a small stone fell out. It was a small red stone. Red. It's red. He got the red stone, oh my god. He really got the red stone. The classroom was in an uproar. Heath also looked at the small stone on the table, feeling a little happy in his heart. But don't think that this was just an ordinary small stone with a symbolic meaning. These were all magic gems. The composition was the same as magic stones, so they could also be used as magic stones. According to the color, the value of magic gems was also different. Among them, the blue one was equivalent to 1 magic stone, while the yellow one was equivalent to 100 magic stones, which was also equivalent to a middle-grade magic stone. The remaining red one was equivalent to 10,000 magic stones, which was also equivalent to a high-grade magic stone. 10,000 magic stones was an astronomical figure for the apprentices present, so it was not surprising that they were so emotional at this time. Which Cassandra smiled and said, Committee member Ezra has decided to give you the evaluation of the red stone. Let's see what the committee has to say about you. Let me see. Let me see. As she spoke, she tore open the second letter. Oh. It's still a red stone. Which Cassandra put on a surprised expression. Committee member Baston, a red stone. Committee member Carey, a red stone. Committee member Brownie also gave you a red stone. Committee member Tucker, Committee member Jethry also gave you a red stone. The students in the classroom were once again in an uproar. 7 red stones. 70,000 magic stones. The students were both envious and jealous. Everyone's eyes seemed to be red from the reflection of the red stones. Which Cassandra smiled and handed the 7 red stones to Heath. Very good, Apprentice Heath. It's been a long time since I've seen an apprentice who can get 7 red stones. You're very good. Heath took the stones and said, thank you. He thought that the reward would come to an end at this point, but unexpectedly, which Cassandra took out another item from her bag. After seeing this item, the apprentices in the classroom were so envious that they almost fainted. It was a small glass bottle with colorful liquid inside. Even through the crystal bottle, which had the effect of blocking the elements, they could feel the violent elemental fluctuations inside. The apprentices' eyes were red. Elemental water. Oh my god! It's elemental water! It's really elemental water! What which Cassandra took out was nothing else but the elemental water that Heath had seen at the auction, which had sold for 180,000 magic stones. The witch handed the elemental water to Heath and said, "This is elemental water. It's a reward given by the tower for your outstanding performance in the war. I hope it can help you with your training." Heath took the elemental water and said, "Thank you." Which Cassandra was non-committal and said, "No need to thank me. It's only fair to give something in return. You deserve all of this." The rating continued. Next, which Cassandra gave each apprentice a rating and a corresponding stone. Except for one apprentice who could not complete the compulsory mission, the rest of the apprentices all got stones, but none of them were as exaggerated as Heath's. Most of them were yellow stones mixed with blue stones. 2 other apprentices who went to the battlefield like Heath got 2 red stones, which was the highest rating after Heath. To be able to get red stones in a compulsory mission was definitely an excellent performance. If it were any other time, it would definitely be a sensation. Unfortunately, with Heath as the leader, the 2 of them were not as dazzling. Take your stones and go to the mission area to get the corresponding mission reward. Then, let's call it a day. After the announcement of the rating, which Cassandra left. After the witch left, the apprentices crowded around Heath like stars surrounding the moon, and all kinds of congratulations were heard. "Apprentice Heath, congratulations! It's my honor to be classmates with such an outstanding genius like you. Are you interested in having dinner later?" Seeing that everyone was so enthusiastic, no matter how unique Heath was, it was not good for him to continue being arrogant. So he thought for a moment and said straightforwardly, "Today, at the Green Bamboo Hut, you can eat whatever you want. My treat." The Green Bamboo Hut was a magic restaurant run by a few apprentices in the area of the tower. Behind it was an official apprentice as support. There were often rare ingredients such as snow dragon fruit and illusion heart flower. It was said that there were even apprentices who had eaten mermaid meat here. In addition, the apprentice chef here had superb culinary skills. He had specially gone to the secular world to find a chef to learn from. The delicacies he made were particularly tempting. Therefore, the business here was also very good. However, the price was not cheap. It could be considered a high-end place among the apprentices. A meal would cost at least a few hundred magic stones. The apprentices present had a monthly income of 1 to 200 magic stones. At such a high-end occasion, they would definitely not have the ability to have extravagant hopes. At this moment, hearing Heath's bold words, the entire classroom was once again filled with joy. "Apprentice Heath, you're even greater than Merlin." "Heath. I'm willing to make you king." "Heath. Heath." It was night. The night was as cold as water, and the galaxy was brilliant. Heath walked alone on the winding path back to the cabin. His footsteps were a little unsteady. Although after the banquet ended, there was more than one witch who either openly or secretly invited Heath to spend a wonderful night at their place, Heath still refused and then found an excuse to leave alone. To be honest, he was actually a little tempted. It was definitely not as easy as Heath made it seem to be on the battlefield. Being able to retreat unscathed in a place where people could lose their lives at any time was a bit of strength, but more importantly, he was always 120% focused. After such a tense time, naturally, he would feel a little depressed. Now that he was back, Heath naturally wanted to relax, and sex was undoubtedly a very good way to relieve stress. It was just that. The disease of germophobia could only be experienced by people who had it. To be honest, although it was a little evil, Heath even had the idea to go out and buy a female slave. As he was thinking about this, Heath came to the front door of his house. Just as he reached here, his footsteps suddenly stopped. He raised his head and looked ahead. At the front door of Heath's small house, there was a thin figure standing there. It was a young girl. Her temperament was like frost, and her silver-grey hair swayed in the wind. Their eyes met, and they both read a word from each other's eyes. Desire. Heath thought to himself, this is like someone sending a pillow for you to sleep on when you're sleepy. What else was there to say? Chapter 65, Clean. Like Heath, Shirley was also a very clean person. Therefore, she had been in a celibate state for more than half a year since Heath left. With the succubus blood in her body, it was really. It could be said that every cell and every spiritual end had been filled with desire. It could be said that she was on the verge of going crazy. The next day, at dawn, a little sunlight passed through the thick dark clouds and through the cross-shaped window into the messy room. Heath, who had been sunburned to the brow, opened his eyes. He sat up and shook his head. At this moment, the alcohol had subsided. The crazy night last night had gradually returned to Heath's memory. Thinking of this, he could not help but turn his head to look to the side. Unfortunately, all he could see was a few silver-grey hairs scattered on the white bed sheets. Just like last time, the girl had disappeared without a trace. Heath was speechless. Do you have to be so straightforward every time? Even the Johns and prostitutes would at least say goodbye to each other and come back to take care of business next time, right? Last night, other than MMHMM. And so on. The two did not even say anything decent. But isn't this good too? Both sides get what they want without any emotional entanglements. Not only does it satisfy our physiological needs, but we also don't have to worry about irrational behavior. It's very suitable for a wizard's way of life. Shaking his head, Heath put away these messy thoughts. Then, he clapped his hands gently and released the wizard's hand. Immediately, the clothes that were scattered in the room, the cabinets that were turned over, the bottles and jars that fell, and so on, all floated up. The clothes were put into the laundry basket, the cabinets leaned back against the wall, and the bottles and jars flew into the cabinets. Finally, he snapped his fingers, and the door opened with a click. A breeze swept in, and the dust inside flew out. In the blink of an eye, the mess in the room had disappeared, and the room was restored to its original state. Heath was satisfied, and he began to sing the ballad that the wizards had been spreading. Magic, a magic that can do anything. With it, I can clean the house, wash the clothes, and fold the quilts. With it, I can call the wind and summon the rain, and turn every stone into gold. I am greater than a god. Do you want it? Then meditate, meditate, meditate. Humming a song, Heath closed his eyes and began his daily meditation. It was a new day. After lunch, he went to the tower to deal with two things. One was to receive the reward after the mission rating, and the other was to register the items that he had obtained during this trip. All the items that an apprentice obtained through a method other than the tower could be kept as his own, but he had to register them in the tower, including wizard tools, spells, potions, blueprints, recipes, and even materials. If he did not register them, these would be considered illegal items, and once they were discovered, they would be dealt with. And taking advantage of this opportunity, Heath also cleaned up a lot of the things on his body. There were too many secrets, and there would always be a time when they would reveal themselves. If he was not careful and used so many spells, it would be troublesome if one of them was caught. Since it was not clear when the time came, he might as well take advantage of this opportunity to legalize some of the less important parts of his body. This way, he would be more grounded when he used them in the future. As for whether not revealing his wealth would attract the attention of others, Heath had considered it. In short, he was now somewhat famous in Shadow Tower. There were many people who would be envious of him if he revealed his wealth, but it was not to the extent that he would get into trouble. The Grimm brothers were an extreme case. Moreover, even the Grimm brothers only knew how to find soft persimmons to pinch. It was impossible for them to act against someone like him, whom they knew very well had the wizard's attention. Would they want to have a bad relationship with him? In short, taking advantage of this opportunity, Heath reported a lot of things. Including the magic he had extracted from the Grimm brothers earlier, the pile of magic stones he had sold half a year ago, the magic he had extracted on the battlefield, and so on. Other than the God Seal, Life Refining Manual, Bloodline Magic, and other things that involved his core secrets that the wizards could trace back to the source, the rest were all legitimized by him using this opportunity. After receiving the registration list that he handed over, Apprentice Daniel at the registration office was greatly shocked. This little old man, who had only a few strands of hair left, opened his mouth wide and said with a shocked expression, These are all things that you picked up when you were out on a mission this time." Heath nodded. "Yes." Daniel took a deep breath. "Oh God, did you dig up a wizard's grave? Or did you destroy the black rat's nest?" There were more than a dozen spell models, several wizard tools, and all sorts of materials. There were even rare materials like the forest banshee. Daniel stared at them with wide eyes. Heath shrugged. I was just lucky. But I heard that the place originally belonged to a dark wizard. The origin of these things was pushed to the dark wizard. Anyway, the tower could not investigate it in detail. Moreover, the dark wizard had already escaped beyond the border, so it was impossible for the tower to investigate it in detail. Daniel said with a surprised tone, no wonder he was able to stand out among the apprentices. Such luck is really enviable. In fact, all of these official apprentices were worth millions. Although Heath's harvest this time was rich, others were only surprised for a moment. This bit of wealth was far from being taken seriously by others. Heath took out a small bottle and handed it over. I heard that apprentice Daniel's recent experiment lacks some forest banshee's blood. Would you like to take a look at this? The energy of official apprentices could not be underestimated. Who knew when he would be of great help to him? A bottle of forest banshee's blood was only a few hundred magic stones. Using it to build a good relationship with him was definitely a profitable business. Daniel was first stunned when he saw the forest banshee's blood in Heath's hands. Then, he laughed and said, I'm beginning to understand why everyone is talking about you now. There are clearly many people who are more talented and have faster cultivation speed than you. Then, he accepted the forest banshee's blood and said emphatically, thank you for the gift. I'll remember it. Don't think that this gift was easy to give. A gift of hundreds of magic stones was not enough to make an official apprentice owe such a favor. If it were other apprentices who gave more valuable items, he would most likely just decline politely. Except for a few exceptions, most official apprentices were more particular about taking care of their feathers. The reason why Daniel was willing to accept Heath's gift here was mainly because he had been in the limelight recently, and even had the possibility of becoming an official apprentice. That was why he gave him this favor. Wizards, official apprentices, and unofficial apprentices all had their own circles and different social classes. It was not so easy to mix them up. Daniel continued, all right, we can chat anytime. Let's get down to business first. As he spoke, he took out a book. Regarding the reward for this mission, the wizards have prepared spells, tools, and resources. You can choose any one of them. Tell me, what do you want? Heath began to think. Spells, tools, and resources, each of them were extremely attractive to wizards. What should he choose? Chapter 66, News. After thinking for a moment, Heath decided, spells. I want spells. He had more than enough resources for his current training. He also had several wizard tools. So after thinking about it, Heath decided to ask for spell models. As a wizard, what was more attractive than mastering a new spell? Daniel asked, are you sure? I think you have enough spell models. It will take you a lot of time and energy to learn them. Heath only registered the spells he had obtained, but he did not mention that he had already learned them. After all, it was a little ridiculous. After all, he had only been a wizard for less than 2 years. Heath shrugged. I like magic. No matter how difficult it is, I'm willing to face it. Seeing that, Daniel did not try to persuade him any further. Many people would only know the pain of nails after they touched the nails. He nodded. All right then. Then, he took a thick magic book. Those who get red stones can get a high-level apprentice spell for free. You can choose one from them. You can learn it slowly after you advance to a middle-level apprentice. Similar to the demonstration scroll of the auction house, this book was also densely packed with spell books. If you were interested in that spell, you could give a demonstration with just a touch. Shape-shifting, invisibility, shrinking, item activation, elemental summoning. All kinds of spells were dazzling to the eyes. I really want to learn all of them. Seeing that Heath was still hesitating, Daniel could not help but ask, do you need my advice? Pausing for a moment, he said meaningfully, consider it as a small gift in return for you. Heath understood Daniel's meaning and could not help but say, please speak. Daniel said, it's best to choose a spell that can increase your combat power. Think about what you lack in your current battle and then make a decision. Heath was stunned. Is the war not over yet? Battle spells were definitely used for battle. Daniel mentioning this for no reason made people think in this direction. Daniel shook his head. It has nothing to do with war. Then, he hesitated for a moment before saying, originally, I shouldn't have revealed it. After all, it's unfair. However, it's rare for an interesting character to appear in this lifeless tower. I also hope to see your legend continue. Pausing for a moment, he opened his mouth and explained, let me tell you this. In the next 2 years, there will be a trial targeted at you. It's said that only apprentices under the age of 20 will be invited to participate. The rewards of this trial are something that even I would be tempted by. And he raised his voice and emphasized, my teacher told me that in this trial, there will be at least one official apprentice. He explained, this trial will have a large proportion of battles, so I advise you not to waste this precious opportunity to learn some nonsense. The focus of the spells will be on battles. Heath was very surprised. He did not expect a small gift to know such news in advance. He quickly thanked, thank you very much, sir. Daniel shook his head. You're welcome. I should be the one thanking you. I've been looking for the blood of the forest banshee for quite a few days. Then, he continued, all right, think about it carefully. Heath nodded. Then, he began to seriously ponder. If it was a battle aspect, his long-range attacks such as Fireball and Lightning Strike were already very good. As for his defense, his Mimicry Shield did not lag behind anyone of the same level. In close combat, he had a high-level knight, and with the support of Gale, he could attack and defend, he could long-range and close combat. Currently, his overall combat strength was definitely among the best among the same level. Then what was he lacking? Oh, right. Suddenly, he thought of his own weakness. He could not help but ask, are there any spells that can deal a wide area of damage? It was not easy to continue to improve in a small-scale one-on-one fight, but in AoE spells, Heath was still lacking. The battle between the two wizards on the battlefield that day had left a deep impression on him. Daniel thought for a moment. A large-scale spell. After thinking for a moment, he took the book and gently knocked on it. For a moment, there was only a crisp sound, and the pages of the book flew up automatically without any wind. After flying for a while, a large-scale AoE spell scroll appeared in front of Heath. This was a plane, and on the plane was a large-scale hexagram magic circle that was a few hundred meters long. A wizard wearing a large hood stood in the center of the hexagram magic circle, chanting a high-pitched incantation. As the obscure intonation was chanted, the magic circle on the ground jumped out with flames. The flames were like giant snakes, swimming on the magic circle. In a moment, the entire magic circle was burning, turning into a sea of fire. Even just looking at the virtual image, Heath seemed to be able to feel the astonishing power. He said in surprise, this is an apprentice-level spell. This power, even compared to the spell cast by the two wizards during the decisive battle that day, was probably not much different? Daniel nodded and said, it's genuine. But then, he changed the topic, he added, but this is a spell in the direction of a magic circle. Before you become an official wizard, you need to go through careful arrangements before casting the spell, and you also need to use a lot of magic materials, but its power is already close to an official level spell. Its name is Hellfire Sea, and it is one of the most outstanding high-level apprentice spells. I see that your fire element affinity is very good, so it should be very suitable for this spell. Heath asked, does that mean that official level wizards don't need casting materials anymore? Daniel nodded. The magic power that official level wizards can use is enough to support the operation of this spell. Heath thought for a moment. Then, he decided to accept Daniel's suggestion. In that case, I'll have to trouble you. You're welcome. You deserve it. Daniel took a goatskin scroll from the shelf and handed it to Heath. Then this belongs to you. Take it back and study hard. Make sure you master it within 2 years. Maybe you can use it when the time comes. Do your best. Try to become an official apprentice as soon as possible. Only then can you focus on magic. An unofficial apprentice has no future. Halfway through his sentence, Daniel seemed to have realized something. He smiled sheepishly and said, ha ha ha, old people like to nag. I said so much nonsense just because I wasn't paying attention. I hope you don't mind. Although Heath was very hopeful now, it was still unknown whether he could become an official apprentice. It was indeed a bit too much to say it to him now. Heath shook his head. How could it be? I should be thanking you for your suggestions. What Daniel said was indeed correct. After what Heath had learned during this period of time, the difference between an official apprentice and an unofficial apprentice in Shadow Tower or in the entire Underdark Tresia was really not something that could be described by a single word. To make an inappropriate analogy, it was really like the difference between a noble and a serf. Chapter 67, March. It was still too early to talk about the trial. After all, there were still 2 years left, so there was no need to rush it. Having just ended a war, Heath also needed a moment to catch his breath. In the following days, his life returned to its former tranquility. He meditated every day, carried out missions to earn magic stones, and went to the tower to attend a free public lesson once a week. The sun rose, and he returned at sunset. He returned to the life of a magic maniac that the apprentices had been talking about. The slightly different thing was that every other month, his regular partner, Shirley, would come to the cabin to have a deep and simple exchange with him. The two of them were still the same as the previous 2 times. They were purely releasing their physical desires without any unnecessary emotional exchanges. She would usually leave soon after her desires were controlled, and she would not even wait until the next morning. There were even 2 times when Heath took the initiative to invite her to stay for breakfast, but Shirley politely refused. It could be seen that she was deliberately avoiding the possibility of a spiritual collision. Just as the rumors had it, Shirley was a magic maniac who was no less famous than Heath, and she was even more hardworking than him in practicing magic. Everyone knew that she was obsessed and crazy about magic. She had no friends, no hobbies, and no feelings. She didn't need these either. To her, having magic was enough. She even deliberately turned these things away. After all, this was the only way to maintain absolute rationality. 3 months later, in the Shadow Tower, library, new book area. In front of a large and brand new bookshelf, Heath was holding a book that had just been sent into the tower. The crisp sound of a system notification rang in his ears. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained knowledge, introduction to the Old Land Martial Arts Tournament. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained knowledge, selected collection of the 16 Kingdoms nobles by the edge of the forest. Beep, successful extraction. Obtained knowledge, detailed explanation of the subject of ghosts. Beep, successful extraction. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen books had been completely extracted by Heath. All the information had been stored in his mind. Then, he put the last book back on the shelf with a disappointed look on his face. Not far away, the librarian, Apprentice Bernard, walked over and said enthusiastically, "What's the matter, Apprentice Heath? Didn't you find any books that you are interested in?" Bernard, the unofficial apprentice, was not stingy with the smile on his face when he saw this magic maniac who was so popular that it was rumored that he might become an official apprentice. Heath shook his head and said, "They are all unrelated to magic." Bernard smiled and said, "Of course, magic is what we wizards should focus on all our lives, but it shouldn't be the only thing in life, right?" Heath said, "For example?" Bernard said, "There are too many. For example, music, dance, food, wine, art, culture. Humans have created many interesting things for us. I heard that you already have an external certificate. Is that so?" An external certificate was a special identity certificate given to them by the Shadow Tower as an unofficial apprentice. An apprentice with such a certificate could accept missions outside of the Underdark Tresia. This type of certificate was only given to apprentices who performed well. It was considered a special identity between an official apprentice and an unofficial apprentice. Heath nodded. Yes. He had gotten this identity after coming back from the battlefield. He had just accepted a mission to go out yesterday. Bernard said, "Then don't waste your identity. Go out and take a walk. Anyway, there are cultivation resources provided by the tower for you when you are outside, aren't there? In the next few days, a cultural festival is being held in Alund. There will also be a tournament of knights in the city. This is a very interesting project. I think you can go and have a look. The world cannot be without magic, but the world cannot only have magic." Heath raised his eyebrows. Alund. This was a count's territory in the southern part of the Helen Kingdom. The mission he had accepted was to go to the vicinity of this noble's territory. Bernard asked, "Why? Does Apprentice Heath know about this place?" Heath said, "I accepted Wizard Bagra's request to help him go to the lake forest to feed the lake banshee. The lake forest was right next to Alund." Bernard smiled and said, "That's a coincidence. Go take a look. You won't be disappointed." Heath nodded. "Okay, thank you for your advice. I will consider it." A few days later, Alund, Lake Forest. Lake Forest was a forest outside Alund city. Because there was a bay lake in the forest, it had this name. Legend had it that there was a goddess living in this lake. If one made a sincere wish and offered a sacrifice to the lake, the goddess would appear and fulfill the wish of the person making the wish. At this moment, in the forest at the center of the lake, walking on the soft soil road made of dead leaves and debris, Heath was trying to determine the direction. Lake, where is the lake? The forest scenery here was almost the same. Tall old trees and lush green lawns made it feel like he was walking on the same spot no matter where he went. Forget it, let's use the Ghost Scout. Just as he was about to release the Ghost Scout, a voice suddenly came from the front. Tiffany, what wish did you make to the goddess of the lake? Two young girls could be vaguely seen walking over from the front. One had brown hair and the other had blonde hair. The two of them were talking animatedly about something. Of course, it's to bless me to meet a handsome knight in the tournament, a hero like Galio. Oh my, you greedy little thing, you're quite ambitious. Lord Galio is a legendary figure who follows the wizard. You might as well make a wish to be the queen. Humph. I have nothing else in my life. I only hope to have a love affair with such a hero. Alright, let's talk about you. What did you wish for? I don't have as big an ambition as you. I only wish to be the queen of love and beauty at the tournament and spend a wonderful night under the moon with my hero. Yay! 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 You're still talking about me, Elsa. You insatiable little slut. Let me see if you're clean or not. Haha. Haha, who's the little slut scolding? SHH, someone's coming. When they saw Heath walking over, the two girls immediately stopped playing and regained their composure. Heath was worried about finding his way, so when he saw the situation, he quickly stepped forward and blocked their path. Ladies, please wait. The girls maintained their necessary vigilance and took a step back. They looked at Heath, and one of the brown-haired girls asked, "Who are you? What's the matter?" Heath said, "I'm a traveler from Riiden. I heard that there's a lake here that can make people's wishes come true." The golden-haired Tiffany's eyes lit up. The great hero and idol of hers, Knight Galio, was from Riiden City. She asked with a slight doubt, "Riiden City?" Then she raised her hand and pointed in a direction. "You can see Goddess Lake if you walk straight this way." Heath said, "Thank you very much." The girl said, "You're welcome. In that case, I wish you all the best, stranger." Heath said, "Okay, thank you again." The two girls left. When they walked some distance away, Elsa, who had brown hair, could not help but secretly pull Tiffany and whispered, "Tiffany, why are you so warm to him? Aren't you afraid that the lice on that commoner will jump over?" Tiffany said, "Don't say that, Elsa. My father taught me that even slaves should be respected." She secretly glanced back and then added, "And look, he has a sword on him. Maybe he is a knight." Elsa said in disdain, "Knight? Come on, just look at his age. He is probably just a wandering knight apprentice who wants to try his luck in the martial arts competition. He probably bought that sword with all his money." Tiffany said, "But he's quite handsome." Elsa sneered, "Yay, little slut, are you in heat? You don't even care about their status? Ha ha ha." The two girls laughed and walked away. On the other side, Heath heard the conversation between the two girls without missing a word because of the extraordinary hearing brought by being a peak knight. He could not help but look down at his clothes. He was curious. "I remember that this is the latest fashion from Riiden City. Why am I looked down upon? Was it because he could not wear these clothes with temperament? Or was it because of that bold tailor?" With his thoughts running wild, Heath walked deeper into the forest. After passing through a small forest, a beautiful lake soon appeared in his field of vision. Chapter 68, In the Lake. This was a lake hidden in a dense forest. The surface of the lake was bright and calm like a mirror, surrounded by tall and vigorous trees. The scenery was pleasant. Hoo-hoo! At this moment, a gentle breeze blew over. The surface of the lake rippled, and as the sun shone, the waves sparkled, as if countless gold had been deposited in the lake. Along with the wind, pious prayers were heard. "O great goddess of the lake, you are the master of the forest and the mother of the earth. Everyone knows of your benevolence. Please open your eyes and look at your servant, Griffin. Please bless him and bring him a glimmer of light in his dark life, so that this family can regain its former glory." It was a middle-aged man standing by the lake. He was wearing a pleated green jacket and grey-black stockings. Every wrinkle on his jacket could be seen to have been carefully tidied up, but the color of his clothes was a little faded. He was a noble, but he was not rich. His family might have declined. After a series of pious prayers, the man said to the only servant behind him, "Loyal Carmen, bring the sacrifice over." The servant handed over a sack. "Yes, Master Griffin, but are you sure you want to do this? We have no money, and Carmen is still hungry." The man said, "The goddess will bless us. When I find the knights and restore the glory of the Griffin family, nothing is more important than this now." The servant sighed. "I hope we don't starve to death before then." The man took the sack and poured the contents into the water. There were apples, bananas, roasted chicken, wine, and all kinds of delicacies. Then, he prayed again and left with the servant. The wind had stopped, and the surface of the lake returned to its mirror-like calm. Heath came to the lakeside and took out a golden bell. He held the bell and shook it gently. Ding-ling! The crisp sound of the bell spread into the distance. After a moment of silence. Gulp! A light sound suddenly came from the lake. Bubbles rose from the bottom of the lake. Then, something slowly swam up from the clear bottom of the lake. It was a beautiful girl with smooth and clean skin, big watery eyes, beautiful brown hair, and a little bit of playfulness on her pink cheeks. She was holding a red apple in her hand. She surfaced and swam to the lakeside, lying on a piece of driftwood. Kaka! There was a clear sound. She took a bite of the apple and looked at Heath. "No? Where's Hodgson?" This was a lake banshee. She was a demonized creature under the banshee family. She was intelligent and mischievous. She liked to disguise herself as a young girl and liked to listen to stories. She often played tricks on travelers passing by. They were very good at enchanting wizard tools. Therefore, the qualified wizards would raise one and ask them to help deal with the wizard tools when they needed it. Heath took out a bamboo basket and said, "Apprentice Hodgson has something to do. I've been ordered to deliver food to Lady Banshee. My name is Heath." As he spoke, he took out a bamboo basket from his dimensional pocket. Inside the basket were large white worms. These were gold-devouring worms, a favorite food of the lake banshee. Moreover, eating them could increase their efficiency of enchantment. "Heath." The lake banshee thought for a moment and suddenly asked, "Are you that black-haired apprentice? The magic genius who led the army to defeat the Jed in Twilight Fortress?" Heath said, "If you're referring to the war not long ago, then I don't think there's a second Heath." The lake banshee's big eyes lit up. "Ah! It's really you." She looked a little emotional and swam around in the water. "Do you know? Everyone is talking about you now. Whether it's wizards or humans, I can hear about your deeds almost every day." Heath said, "The heat will soon go down." The lake banshee shook her head noncommittally and looked like a little fangirl. Legends never fade. Heath really did not expect his reputation to spread so far. However, this was also a pleasant surprise. This way, things would be much easier to handle. After thinking about it, Heath suddenly said, "Today, apart from bringing food to Lady Banshee, I also have some personal troubles and want to ask for Lady Banshee's help." In addition to earning magic stones, this mission was also for this problem. The lake banshee said straightforwardly, "Please say it. As long as it is within my ability, Kui Psyche is very willing to work for you." Heath nodded. "Kui Psyche, water fairy? It's really a very appropriate name." Kui Psyche smiled. "You are the most knowledgeable apprentice I have ever seen. I am looking forward to what kind of difficulties can help you. This trouble belongs to you." After pausing for a moment, Heath went straight to the point. "I have a wizard relic that has a spiritual imprint that can't be removed. I hope that I can borrow your soul gem to help remove the spiritual imprint on it. Is that okay?" After coming down from the battlefield, Heath had started to deal with the spiritual imprint left on the necromancer's scepter. However, no matter how hard he tried, he failed. His current strength was still too far away from the spiritual imprint of an official wizard relic. After he failed to deal with the spiritual imprint, Heath could only try to borrow external force. After looking through a lot of information, he quickly found a way, which was the soul gem. This was a gem that was bred by the lake banshee. It was usually used as a supplementary material to make wizard tools, but it had a very strong spiritual resistance. With it in the wizard formation, it could effectively remove the spiritual imprint on the wizard tool. Kui Psyche suddenly cried out in surprise, "Ah!" Heath asked in puzzlement, "What's wrong?" Kui Psyche said in a troubled manner, "I'm very sorry. You really came at a bad time. The last time Hodgson came, I already gave them to him. Why? Didn't he tell you? Heath was stunned. He shook his head and said, I didn't meet with apprentice Hodgson before I came here. Kuisaki said, then can you wait? The next batch of soul gems will mature in 3 years. I will choose the best quality one for you. Heath frowned. Is that so? There were only 2 years left before the trial of the tower. It was obviously too late if he could only get the soul gem after 3 years. Kuisaki could not help but say, if you are in a hurry, you might as well go to the city to take a look. A few years ago, I threw away a defective piece. The human lord there happened to pass by and picked it up as a treasure. He was very excited at that time. I heard that he wanted to make it into the most beautiful jewelry in the world. If it is only used to remove the spiritual brand, that defective piece is more than enough. Heath's eyes lit up. He quickly bowed to Kuisaki. Thank you very much for your help. As he spoke, he took out a bag of magic stones that he had prepared beforehand and handed it over. Kuisaki shook her head and smiled like a crescent moon. It's Kuisaki's honor to be able to help a legend like you. There's no need for magic stones. There's no use for me to stay in this lake and take magic stones. Heath hesitated. This was not in line with the principle of equal exchange between wizards. Seeing that he still wanted to say something, Kuisaki had already dragged the sack and swam away. All right, go deal with your business. There's still time in the future. There will be plenty of opportunities to repay me in the future. Seeing that, Heath did not say anything else. He bowed again and turned to leave. Chapter 69, Gemstone. Alun City, the only city-state in the Count of Alun's territory. The structure was similar to that of Riiden City, with tall walls made of large bluestones, narrow long streets, rows of Gothic-style small buildings, tall bell towers, and so on. This place belonged to the Lambert family, and the territory was rich in all kinds of gemstones, so it was also known as the Gemstone family. Walking on the small brick-paved road, Heath was secretly thinking about how to get this soul gem. The simplest way was undoubtedly to directly find the Lambert family, reveal his identity as a wizard, and through the most direct transaction, he believed that no matter what treasure it was, it would not be difficult to take it away. However, there was a problem involved. The mission Heath accepted was not a mission like the one in Riiden City. According to the rules, he did not have the authority to make a deal with the mortals here. If it was not because he had no other choice, Heath still did not want to break the rules. It was not a big deal, but it was a taboo. Wizards hated breaking the rules. Then, only robbery? Theft? 2 options, Heath thought. Normal transactions did not conform to the rules, but robbery was within the rules. Although it was strange, the situation was like this. Forget it, let's go find out some information first. Even if I want to rob, I should at least find out where the gem is. With this in mind, Heath walked around the street and soon locked onto a tavern on the street. A tavern was the place with the most extensive information channels in the world. Pushing open the wooden door, Heath walked into the tavern called the Sword of the Brave. It was currently dusk, and the tavern was at its busiest time. The commoners who had been busy all day would come to the tavern at this time to drink 2 cups of rye wine, eat 2 pieces of bacon, and brag about all sorts of interesting things. The sound of the collision of the oak cups, the vulgar swearing, the clamor, all kinds of voices rang out continuously. The smell of sweat, wine, and meat soup mixed into a strange smell that filled the air. Heath came to the bar counter, sat down on the high stool, took out a gold coin, and put it on the table. He said straightforwardly, "A cup of wheat wine. I want to ask about something else." The owner of the tavern was a middle-aged man in a brown tank top. His eyes were shining with shrewdness. When he saw the gold coin on the table, he immediately put on the warmest smile on his face. Of course, this strange guest. The Sword of the Brave has the most sensitive ears of Alund. No matter what you want to know, you can get the answer here. As he spoke, he shouted to the scantily clad maid not far away, "Bernice, bring this guest a bunch of wheat wine, wheat." The maid quickly brought a large oak cup filled with wine. Heath picked it up and took a sip. Although this wheat wine was not as sweet as the wizard's fruit wine and not as fragrant as the wine in the noble's manor, it still had a unique taste. It was a little astringent, a little pungent, and also had a little earthy smell. One gulp of it would make one's throat burn, but after a while, one would feel exceptionally comfortable. To put it more accurately, it was painful and happy. It was like a true portrayal of the laborers in this world. While sipping the wheat wine in his cup, Heath asked, I heard that a few years ago, Count Lambert found a strange gem near the goddess lake. I want to know everything about it. The tavern owner said enthusiastically, yes, yes. The goddess blessing, the most beautiful gemstone in Alund. The goddess gift to the brave Lambert. Everyone here knows about it. From the tavern owner, Heath received detailed information about the soul gemstone. Just as Kui Psyche said, after the Lord found the soul gem, he treated it as a treasure and kept it. Then, he found a craftsman to make a necklace for it and named it the Goddess Blessing. It was said that this name would be given because Count Lambert was the nephew who had ascended the throne. The old Count Lambert did not have any children, so he had chosen one of his nephews. At that time, Count Lambert's line of succession was not very high. However, because he had picked up this soul gem, it had attracted the attention of the old Count Lambert. Thus, he was determined to be the heir despite the objections of the public. After listening to the introduction, Heath said, for such a treasure, the Lambert family must guard it tightly, right? The tavern owner said half-jokingly, why? Are you going to steal the goddess blessing? Although everyone in the city wants to see a big piece of news, I think it's best that you don't do this. No one knows where the goddess blessing was placed by Count Lambert. Over the years, many famous thieves have visited Alund. Unfortunately, they didn't find anything and instead hung their heads on the city wall. Hearing the owner's words, Heath began to think. It seemed that he could only start with Count Lambert. First, he had to kidnap this noble. But this was a big problem. According to the rules, although he could do evil, he could not use the power of wizards, or else he would break the rules. Without using the power of wizards, he was just a high-level knight. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to kidnap a Count-level noble. Why is it so troublesome? Just as Heath was in distress, the tavern owner suddenly said, so, if you want the necklace, you should try your best to defeat the competitors in the ring. It's impossible to do evil things. Heath looked at the tavern owner in confusion, not understanding what he was saying. The tavern owner pointed at the cross-shaped sword on Heath's waist and asked in confusion, why? Aren't you here for the tournament? Heath shook his head and said, no. This time, it was the tavern owner's turn to be surprised. Then why are you asking about the goddess blessing? He looked as if he had seen a ghost, and the corner of his mouth twitched twice. It can't be that you really have some wicked ideas. Heath stopped the tavern owner from thinking further. He took out another gold coin and put it on the wooden table. Tell me, what's the connection between this tournament and the necklace? Seeing the gold coin, the doubt in the owner's eyes disappeared. No matter what was good or bad, gold coins were enough. He explained, every 3 years in the autumn, the Lambert family will hold a tournament in Alund when the maple leaves are red. Do you know about it, sir? Heath nodded. The Alund tournament was a very famous tournament in the Helen Kingdom and the 16 countries at the edge of the forest. He had read about it in the library. The tavern owner continued, every time at this time, the Lambert family would carefully choose a good gemstone and make it into a necklace for the champion. And this year's champion necklace is the goddess blessing. Heath was surprised. Is the Lambert family willing to give up such an important necklace? The tavern owner said, the gemstone family only produces gemstones and does not collect gemstones. Even the most beautiful gemstones in the world are not allowed to stay in their hands for more than 5 years. This has been passed down from generation to generation since their family was founded. And this year is the 5th year that Count Lambert received the goddess blessing. Heath came to a sudden realization. Then from the looks of it, things seemed to have become easier. Heath immediately asked, how do I register for this tournament? Chapter 70, Legendary. A customer at a table next to him said, ask the nobles for a recommendation letter. On Sunday morning, wear your armor and bring your cross sword to the western suburbs. The tournament will be held there. Heath asked, recommendation letter. The tavern owner nodded. There are many middlemen in the city. As long as they are willing to pay gold coins, they can contact the nobles. Do you need me to recommend one for you? If you participate in the tournament this year, even if you can't win, you can still receive the guidance of the follower, Lord Gallio. Gallio? Where had he heard this name before? Heath was puzzled. Follower. The first customer said proudly, the watchman of Twilight Fortress, one of the 800 brave warriors who followed the wizard to stop the private army of over 10,000 wreckers. You can't be unaware of the legendary hero of our kingdom, right? Heath laughed dryly. Ha, ha, it's really not that clear. He remembered that it was the knight with a square face who helped Count Croya fight for a while after his death. The customers looked at Heath as if they were looking at a fool. The customer asked, "Foreigner, did you walk out of the cave in the north? You don't even know such a legendary story." Heath asked with interest, "Oh? Then can you tell me about it?" As he spoke, he said to the tavern owner beside him, "Give this friend a glass of wine." The maid handed over a large oak cup. The customer laughed out loud. "Haha, thank you for your generosity." He picked up the oak cup and took a big sip. Then, he stepped on the stool and jumped onto the wooden table. With one hand on his chest and the other raised high, he used an aria tone to describe the story. "That was 6 months ago, when the despicable wrecker people suddenly provoked us. We only had 800 people, but the number of enemies exceeded 10,000. Everyone was scared out of their wits, except for that lord. Count Croya's death forced this team into a desperate situation. It was then that the legend stood up and bravely shouldered the responsibility of defending against the enemy. 800 people attacked 10,000 people. I really don't want to believe it." Even though everyone had heard this story countless times recently, and even knew every detail like the back of their hand, when they heard the customer's description, the people in the tavern quickly immersed themselves in it. When they heard the customers talk about the army of 10,000 undead, they were terrified. When they heard the wizards killing the enemy knights on the city wall, they cheered. When they heard the count dying in battle, they were anxious. It was as if everyone had really stood on the city wall and become one of the members, experiencing the enemy's attack and fighting side by side with the wizard. Finally, the customers shouted, "They are legends! Legends!" The entire pub burst into cheers. "Legends! Legends! Legends! Legends!" Heath looked at the customers in the pub who were like a climax and could not help but open his mouth. Although he already knew from Kui Psyche that he was popular, the popularity was still far beyond Heath's expectations. No matter how thick-skinned he was, he could not help but blush at this moment. He could not help it. In the praises of the customers, he had been completely described as a fearless, brave, valiant, and heroic hero. No matter how he looked at it, he did not feel that it matched him. Heath took out 2 gold coins and put them on the table again. "I'll buy everyone's drinks today." "Haha, praise you, generous young man. You're as great as a wizard." The tavern was once again filled with excitement. After drinking the wine, the first customer raised his glass and said, "Thank you, generous young man. In return, I advise you not to participate in the martial arts competition." Heath raised his eyebrows. "What?" The customer said, "A Lunt's martial arts competition is not a game. I've seen too many young people like you who want to make a name for themselves on this platform, but in the end, they are all beaten up. Those who are lucky will have their arms and legs broken. Those who are unlucky will even lose their lives in the arena. This is a martial arts competition that even a true knight can participate in. Fighting with a wooden sword that you've experienced in the countryside is completely different." The other customers also started to discuss. "Yet, do you still remember the young man from Dogtown who had half of his head chopped off last year?" "How could I not remember? He didn't die on the spot and even convulsed on the ground for a long time. I will never forget that terrifying look in my life. That kid from the old Potter family was also crippled by someone in the arena." The tavern owner also nodded and advised, "For the sake of the gold coins, I think you should consider everyone's suggestion. Although there are quite a number of people who are famous in the martial arts arena, most of them have become dead souls under the swords of others." Heath nodded. "Thank you for your advice." Seeing his expression, no one said anything more. They only shook their heads in pity. They had seen too many young people like him. They were full of vigor and fighting spirit. They would not listen to any advice. They could only turn back when they hit a wall. At this moment, a burst of laughter suddenly came from outside the window. "Ha ha ha, didn't your parents tell you that a little girl shouldn't go out alone? Quickly lift up your cloak. The money our boss lost must be under there." They saw 2 men who were obviously not good people blocking the way of a young girl outside the tavern. It was a scene that often appeared in storybooks where hooligans would flirt with little girls. Heath subconsciously looked in that direction, and when he saw it, he could not help but be stunned. His expression was very surprised. The customers in the tavern all frowned. It's Bruno and those bastards again. We should really hang them on the city wall. Isn't anyone going to take care of them? Can we call the city guards? Forget it. These scoundrels are only taking advantage of their words. They won't do anything to that girl. That's right. How can they live with a mad dog pestering them? There was a hint of helplessness in the tone of the diners. While everyone was discussing, Heath suddenly pulled out a chair and walked out of the tavern. The eyes of the diners in the tavern could not help but light up when they saw this. Soon, Heath arrived outside the tavern and did not hesitate to meddle in other people's business. He pressed down on the cross sword with one hand and said righteously, "Leave that young lady before I draw my sword." That passionate action was like a knight of justice depicted in a storybook. As he spoke, his gaze fell on the young girl who was blocked in the middle by two villains. He gave the latter a comforting smile and said in a firm tone, "With me here, no one can hurt you." That was so high-spirited. However, what returned to him was a cold expression on the young girl's face. The word boring was written all over her silent pretty face. At this moment, the dusk had passed, and the lanterns had just lit up. Under the white moonlight, her beautiful silver-grey hair swayed in the cool night breeze. Chapter 71, Chance Encounter. The scoundrel Bruno had a surprised look on his face. After being a scoundrel for such a long time, this was the first time he had seen someone actually come out to serve justice. Had he read too many night novels? With this thought in his mind, he immediately put on a fierce expression. He pulled out a dagger and pointed it at Heath with a fierce look on his face. "Are you trying to be a hero?" Heath did not waste any words and went up to kick him. As a high-level knight, he was extremely strong. Even if he just casually kicked him without using any strength, he still sent the villain Bruno flying 7 to 8 meters away. Bang! With a loud sound, the villain, Bruno, knelt heavily on the ground with both knees bent into a shrimp shape. The eyeballs of the underling beside him almost did not fall out. "Monster! Monster!" he shouted and disappeared in an instant. Bruno stretched out his hand towards his companion and opened his mouth wide, wanting to scream for help. However, his injured lungs could only make a shoo sound. In the end, he forced himself to roll and crawl away. Heath ignored these scoundrels and walked over to Shirley. "Apprentice Shirley, are you all right?" Shirley shook her head as if nothing had happened. What a joke! What would a middle-level apprentice do to two scoundrels? She had already cast a spell that could scare them. Even without Heath, these two scoundrels would not dare to do evil in the future. Heath continued to ask, "I still don't know why Apprentice Shirley is here." Shirley said, "I have something to do." After saying that, she did not waste any more time with Heath. Without even saying goodbye, she pulled on her hood and went to the side. She left in a carefree manner. Heath was speechless. Did she have to be so heartless? Although the two of them had a mutually beneficial relationship to begin with, other people did not need to care about his feelings. But how should he put it? It was probably because of a man's pride. This really made Heath feel uncomfortable. He felt a sense of defeat for no reason. After all, the two of them had just spent the night together. Perhaps this is what a natural-born wizard should be like. Shaking his head, Heath put away these messy thoughts and returned to the tavern. Just as he entered, clap, clap, clap. A round of warm applause greeted him. All the customers in the tavern stood up. The contempt and disdain in their eyes had changed. What was left was only admiration and applause. The people cheered loudly. "Young man, you are the bravest young man I have ever met. I take back what I said just now. I believe that you will definitely achieve good results in the martial arts competition. Originally, I was not interested in this martial arts competition, but if you were there, I would definitely go and watch it. At that time, I will bring my son to cheer for you. Good luck! Good luck!" Amidst the cheers of everyone, Heath shrugged. "Thank you." Then, he walked to the bar counter, took out 2 gold coins, and said, "Then, can you help me find a recommendation letter?" The tavern owner bowed very enthusiastically. "It's my honor to serve you." Then, the tavern owner went upstairs and soon led 2 men down. One wore a green pleated jacket and looked like the owner, while the other was dressed as a servant. The tavern owner introduced, "Young warrior, this is Baron Garcia and his servant from Whitewater Bay. They can prepare a recommendation letter for you." Heath looked at the 2 men in surprise. Coincidentally, they were the master and servant whom he had seen by the lake. He said with slight suspicion, Garcia. For some reason, the name sounded familiar to him. The diners quickly gave him an answer. It's Garcia of Whitewater Bay. Descendant of Grand Knight Polo. Unfortunately, he didn't inherit the bravery of his ancestors. Oh, right, I remember now. Heath suddenly realized that he had read the biography of this person in a history book in the library of the Shadow Tower. It was a Grand Knight who was active in this land a long time ago. He was a very famous wizard who had once followed the old land. He smiled politely and said, It's my honor to meet the descendant of the Dragon Slayer. Facing Heath's politeness, the Garcia master and servant did not respond with the enthusiasm they should have. Instead, they stared at Heath with a skeptical gaze. He was really too young. Baron Garcia said to the tavern owner, Tours, can this young man do it? Don't be eliminated in the first round. The tavern owner said with a straight face, Baron Garcia, now you can either pay for my room, or immediately write that damn recommendation letter. At least until you are stripped of your noble title, this will be useful. Garcia said angrily, I am the descendant of a hero. How can you talk to me in such a tone? In the end, he still wrote the recommendation letter honestly. There was nothing he could do. He was hungry. A few days later, in the western suburbs of Alun City. In an empty space in the western suburbs, a spectator stand had been built with wooden shelves. The outer side of the empty space was surrounded by fences, forming a small-scale arena. At this moment, the outer side of the arena was filled with a sea of people. Nobles, country gentry, wealthy people, and other upper-class nobles were sitting neatly in the spectator stand, while the general public was surrounding the fence. Everyone was walking shoulder to shoulder and leading the way. They were all looking at the arena in front of them. The crowd was boisterous and bustling. In the competitor's seat on the side of the arena, Baron Garcia was helping Heath put on the armor with his valet. Carmen, where's the wrist guard? Quickly find the wrist guard. Is there oil on the seam? Didn't I say that? Don't let me see rust. How is it, Heath? Does the armor fit you? Heath had ordered this armor from a blacksmith in the city. After all, it was impossible for a limited space pocket to hold these inexplicable things. Heath moved around and nodded. It's okay. It was a full-body plate armor. It was definitely not comfortable to wear this kind of heavy metal equipment. No matter how well made it would be limited. If it were not for the fact that the tournament had insisted on wearing armor in order to participate in the tournament, Heath would definitely not be willing to wear it. Baron Garcia continued, Carmen, where's the horse? Where's our knight's war horse? Carmen said, It's in the stable, sir. Garcia kicked Carmen angrily. It's already so late, and the horse is still in the stable? Didn't I say to bring it over earlier? I'll go now, sir. Forget it. I'll go myself. Otherwise you'll mess up again. Baron Garcia said, Heath, we'll go get you a warhorse. You wait here for a while. Heath nodded. Okay. The two of them rushed to the stable in a panic. Heath leaned against the fence at the side and waited. Look at that knight. He's so heroic. I've never seen him before. Is he from another city? What beautiful black hair. Although the full metal armor was uncomfortable to wear, it was flawless in terms of appearance. The Gothic style of the armor was flamboyant. The sharp edges and smooth lines made it very attractive to wear. In addition to Heath's handsome features and rare black hair, he quickly attracted the attention of many girls. But at this moment, Heath suddenly felt a sharp gaze shooting at him. He turned his head and saw a familiar figure in the audience. Even without the spiritual connection between the same kind, that silver-grey hair was really eye-catching among the crowd. Why is she here? Heath was very surprised. After all, based on his understanding of Shirley, this girl did not seem like a person who liked to join in the fun. While Heath was puzzled, Shirley's mouth suddenly moved. At the same time, a voice sounded in Heath's ear. This should be the apprentice-level spell, Demon Whisper. It was a spell that could transmit sound over a long distance. It required a demon bloodline to learn it. She said, Why are you here? Compared to her usual coldness, Shirley's voice now had a rare emotion in it. However, this was not a good emotion, but hostility and vigilance. Heath was even more confused. What had offended her? Look. It's the goddess blessing. And the victory wreath. So beautiful. I really hope my knight can win the championship. At this moment, there was a burst of noise from the crowd, and everyone's eyes turned to a certain place. Over there, a noble in a pure white robe walked into the field barefoot under the protection of a group of knights in bright armor. He was carrying a wooden tray with both hands, and his expression was solemn and pious. On the wooden tray was the prize for the champion of this tournament. After seeing the prize, Heath finally knew why Shirley was here. He also finally knew where Shirley's hostility came from. Chapter 72, Conflict. There were 2 items on the wooden tray. One was a beautiful gemstone necklace and the other was a garland made of many small flowers. There was a pure white flower in the middle of the flowers. Heath looked at the strange white flower and suddenly understood everything. Holy Spirit flower. This was a rare holy material that had a very strong effect of purifying the soul. Shirley had the succubus bloodline, so she could not control her own desires. However, if she used the Holy Spirit flower to make a potion, it could effectively cleanse her desires and solve this problem. At this moment, Shirley's voice sounded again. She warned arrogantly, "I took a fancy to this Holy Spirit flower first. Don't cause trouble." It was like a leopard cat showing its fierce fangs when its prey was being targeted by other predators. Heath frowned. In fact, although the Holy Spirit flower was expensive, its use was very simple. It was an important treasure for a wizard like Shirley, but it was not very valuable to him. His purpose of coming here did not include the Holy Spirit flower, so it did not matter if he gave it to Shirley. However, her bossy attitude was really. Although they did have a special relationship, it was only physical. It was purely a mutually beneficial relationship, and no one owed each other anything. It was not that they could not discuss things properly. There was no reason for her to teach him how to do things right from the start. After thinking about it, he calmed down and tried to communicate with her. "Correct your tone and attitude. If you talk nicely, I can consider giving in." Shirley's eyebrows shot up in response. "You're playing with fire. Damn it." He had just asked, and he had already been rejected. Heath retracted the smile on his face with a lack of interest and said calmly, "Then there's nothing more to say." Shirley's expression turned cold. "Are you trying to start a war?" As she spoke, a ball of invisible dark energy was naturally released from her body. It even made the crowd beside her shudder unnaturally. They looked left and right with puzzled expressions. Heath said, "If you think so, then so be it." The conversation ended on bad terms. The conflict between the 2 sides reached an impasse. After a moment of silence, "You'll regret it." After dropping this threat, Shirley withdrew the dark aura from her body and retreated into the crowd. Heath could not help but twitch his lips. In fact, according to his character, he would not easily fight with others for a moment of anger. If it were any other wizard today, he would not have made a bad impression because of the other party's attitude. After all, he was not prepared to kill her. But it was Shirley who could not do it. It was also because of the special relationship between the 2 sides. Although the 2 sides agreed on a mutually beneficial relationship with equal status, he was still a man, not to mention that the female side had always taken the initiative. Now that others had taken advantage of him, he still had to lick their face and send it to them? That was really. It was as if he was a prostitute. In the end, he had only become a wizard for a short period of time. He could not be like other wizards who were purely rational. Just like other wizards who could eat a girl's heart without caring about anything, he could not. It was the same here. Other wizards might feel that it was fine to let someone else have sex with them, but Heath could not accept it. He continued to wait on the spot. Soon, Baron Garcia and his servant came over with horses. It was a purebred Hiram, white in color. It was covered in a layer of silver white armor, and there was a long conical lance beside it. The tournament in Alund was not much different from the tournament in most parts of the world. There were 2 parts, namely the horse battle and the foot battle. The first one was horse and spear tournaments. It was a 300-yard-long track where 2 fully armed knights charged at each other through the fence with spears in their hands. The winner was shot down. There were 5 rounds in total. Winning 3 rounds in a row was considered a promotion. After waiting for a while, Heath received the notice to go on stage. "Heath, don't be nervous. Your warhorse is the best horse in all of Helen." "Haha, yes, what did I say? Yes, don't be nervous." Baron Garcia went down after a round of nagging. Heath kicked the belly of the horse lightly and left the player area to enter the arena. At this moment, he was wearing a full set of silver armor, and his warhorse was also dressed in silver. His left hand was holding a red and white kite shield, and his right hand was holding a long wooden knight spear. As the sun shone on him, he was really majestic and had an extraordinary temperament. What a handsome knight! I applaud you. Please accept my praise. The girls outside the fence were immediately attracted by Heath. The open Helen women did not hesitate to send flying kisses and shouts. It was indeed rare to see someone as handsome as him among the contestants. This angered Heath's opponent. The armor on this fatty, who weighed at least 300 pounds, and the warhorse he was sitting on was both higher grade and stronger than Heath's. One look and one could tell that he was a rich young master. Seeing that Heath was well received by the ladies, he, who was full of jealousy, immediately said angrily, "Pretty boy, I will knock you off your horse." Heath raised his long spear and skillfully shook out a spear flower. "Bring it on!" Clang! With a bell chime, the competition began. Heath pulled down his helmet and mask, raised his kite shield with his left hand, and raised his knight's spear with his right hand. He kicked the horse's belly with his heel, and the warhorse that was in pain began to sprint forward. At the same time, the other side also did the same thing. Accelerate! Accelerate! Accelerate again! With the neighing of the warhorse, the two knights quickly rushed towards each other. At the moment they passed each other, Heath skillfully blocked the opponent's spear with his kite shield, and at the same time, he stabbed his spear towards Fatty. Pang! There was a muffled sound. The wooden knight's spear exploded on Fatty's hard armor, and the tricky angle of the spear just so happened to stab into Fatty's armpit diagonally, directly pushing him off the warhorse. Boom! A loud sound rang out as wood chips flew in all directions. His weight of 300 jin, coupled with his heavy armor, created a large hole in the fence beside him. As for Fatty himself, he simply fainted. One shot to win. The audience cheered. He won. The handsome knight won. What amazing marksmanship! Baron Garcia and the valet hugged each other excitedly. After a short rest, the second round soon arrived. The opponent this time was a young man with a similar figure as Heath. Judging from his skillful horsemanship and smooth marksmanship, it was obvious that he had received rigorous training. It was very likely that he was an apprentice knight. Among all the players, an apprentice knight could be considered as a top-quality player. However, compared to a real knight like Heath, he was inferior. At the same time, when both sides' war horses crossed each other, Heath used his kite shield to block the opponent's attack. At the same time, he thrust his knight's spear into the opponent's chest and once again knocked the opponent off his horse. Another victory with one shot. The crowd was in an uproar. What amazing marksmanship! Another victory with one shot. Black-haired knight! Black-haired knight! Even the nobles in the audience could not help but cast their attention to them. Among them were the two noble ladies who had pointed the way for Heath by the lake, Tiffany and Elsa. Tiffany was the first to recognize Heath. She quickly pulled Elsa, who was next to her. "Elsa, look, it's that black-haired knight from the forest that day. He really came to participate in the tournament, and he seems to be pretty good." Elsa was also a little surprised and said, "It's indeed unexpected. Not only did he win against that fat pig, Walter, but he also knocked Alaman off his horse." Tiffany said, "He will advance if he wins another round." While the two of them were talking, Heath's third opponent went on stage. It was a thin and small young man. His armor that was as rough as an iron sheet and his warhorse that was as thin as a mule all indicated his identity, a wandering knight who was trying to make a name for himself in this tournament. However, after witnessing Heath's first two matches, the thin young man no longer had any hopes of making a name for himself. Although he mustered up the courage to ride his horse into the arena under the urging of the people on the field, his gloomy expression still indicated his depressed mood at the moment. Clang! The bell rang, and the match began again. No matter how unwilling he was, the man still raised his long lance and kicked the small horse as he rushed towards Heath. At the same time, Heath also followed the same pattern and continued to rush towards his opponent. Accelerate! Accelerate! The distance of 300 yards disappeared in a flash. The two sides approached each other. Heath skillfully drew his lance and raised his shield, preparing to strike a decisive blow according to his usual routine. On the other side, the man who had basically given up had only raised his spear in a symbolic manner. He did not even raise his kite shield, instead placing it by his side. He was already prepared to not fall so badly when he was knocked off his horse. The outcome seemed to have been decided long ago. But at this moment, hoo-hoo! The fierce sound of rushing wind could be heard. A gust of cold wind suddenly swept over from the competition grounds, wrapping around the skinny man and his warhorse as though they had eyes. Under the influence of this gust of chilly wind, the skinny man and his warhorse actually miraculously increased their speed by a huge chunk. The long spear that pierced out was as swift as the wind, and even turned into a streak of light. This sudden scene gave Heath a fright. At the critical moment, he hurriedly dodged to the side to avoid the man's charge, but the kite shield in front of him was still grazed by the man's knight's spear. For a moment, there was only a bang, and the kite shield was sent flying. Wow! So powerful! The entire audience was in an uproar. Everyone was stunned by the sudden outburst of the thin man's spear. Even the thin man himself was stunned on the spot with an expression that said, "I'm actually that powerful." On the other side, Heath raised his eyebrows. He lifted his helmet and mask and turned his head to look at a direction in the audience. In the middle of the crowd, Shirley was maintaining the posture of casting a spell with one hand hidden under the white and large cloak. Strong magic power was wrapped around her body. She looked at Heath coldly, her eyes full of warning. Chapter 73, Coercion. It was really. She did not hold back at all. Looking down at the broken kite shield on his wrist, Heath was speechless. In fact, according to the rules, wizards could not abuse spells when they were out in the world. Although it was not a crime to kill people, at least they had to pretend. It seems that it's not unreasonable for wizards to dislike her. Heath had heard many rumors about her when he was in the Shadow Tower. When her apprentices mentioned her, they would always use words like eccentric, strange, and crazy. Even the rumors about her were mostly negative. At that time, he thought that it was mostly just a rumor. Now, it seemed that it was true. Judging from the unrestrained manner in which she broke the rules just now, he should know that she was definitely a repeat offender. At this time, Shirley's voice sounded, repeating the same lines as before. "That Holy Spirit flower is mine." Heath sneered. "Call it, see if it agrees." Shirley's eyes were dark. "You're still looking for trouble." Heath turned around and mocked, "Who gave you the courage to think that a low-level wind-type enhancement spell could make a wizard apprentice who is also a knight retreat?" Shirley did not say anything. Clang! The bell rang again. The competition entered the second round. The thin man jumped on his horse and charged at Heath again. It was probably because of the previous extraordinary performance that the man had an illusion. He was no longer depressed as before. This time, his face was full of arrogance. However, what awaited him this time was not a miracle. It was impossible for Shirley to be so stupid as to use the same move twice. Heath observed the situation carefully. After confirming that Shirley was not going to use this man as an excuse again, he simply sent the man flying with a swing of his pole. The man, who did not have any magical protection, immediately followed in the footsteps of the previous two seniors. However, as the only player who had fought Heath and left a point on the scoreboard, he believed that he would be able to brag about it for the rest of his life after the match was over. Riordan's knight, Heath Noen, wins. The referee announced Heath's advancement in a loud voice. The audience cheered. "Haha! He won! That brave young man has advanced. Well done, black-haired boy." This was the group of customers in the tavern. "Who is this young man? Where did he come from? He's so brave. How could he be unknown in the past?" These were the onlookers. "He is a knight of Riordan. He is a knight of Riordan. He is so brave. It is possible that he was taught by the follower." Tiffany and Elsa's eyes lit up. At this moment, countless audience members cheered for the winner. It was easy to win. It was not easy to win 3 matches in a row. It was even more miraculous to win 3 matches in a row with one strike. That silver armor was so dazzling and heroic at this moment. After the horse battle ended, what followed was the footwork that attracted the attention of thousands of people. For a moment, people's emotions soared. Compared to the horse battle, the footwork was more popular among the people. After all, the horse battle was just a monotonous charge and piercing. The footwork was a real battle in the arena, a competition of sword techniques, a competition of strength, and a battle between men. The 16 contestants who had advanced to the finals would go through 4 rounds of elimination, and the final winner would be decided. Standing in the arena, Heath sized up his first opponent. Ever since Shirley became a demon, he had been guessing and wary of what kind of spell and method this eccentric witch would use to make things difficult for him. Therefore, when this opponent walked into the arena, Heath immediately became alert. Strong elemental fluctuations surrounded his body, and the air was filled with the smell of potions. This smell is fire dragon grass. The blood of a high-level demonized beast, the berserk bear. Heath sniffed twice and roughly guessed what Shirley had done. She must have given the man opposite him a bottle of potion that could temporarily increase the attributes of his 3 circumferences. The few ingredients he smelled were all used for this. If it's a potion made with fire dragon grass, Heath silently thought of a countermeasure. At the same time, the bell rang again. Clang! The 2 people in the ring actually did not attack at the first moment. Heath was cautious and decided to observe first, while his opponent was purely in a daze. This apprentice knight from Alun City was still thinking about why he would drink a water bag handed over by a strange woman for no reason before the match. However, her eyes seemed to have some kind of magic power that people could not resist. Fight! What are you waiting for? Hurry up! The urging voice from the audience seats made the apprentice knight come back to his senses. Today, he wanted to be praised by the follower. The follower had not arrived yet, so he could not lose early. With this thought in mind, the apprentice knight raised his cross sword and took the lead to attack Heath. Day! 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 The sound of footsteps could be heard. The apprentice knight quickly rushed towards Heath. For some reason, the apprentice knight felt as if he had the help of God. Today, his footsteps were much lighter than before. In the blink of an eye, the apprentice knight rushed in front of Heath and stabbed forward with his sword. This sword was as fast as the wind and as fast as lightning. Heath hurriedly jumped back to dodge. The cross-shaped sword pierced through the air and hit the ground. With a boom, a big hole was created in the ground. The audience was in an uproar. What great strength! Is this a knight? No way! Didn't they say that when a knight uses strength, it will glow? I didn't see any luster just now. When did Al become a knight? I didn't hear him say that. Is this kid's strength so ridiculous? His speed just now was also extraordinary. When did this guy become so fierce? His sword pierced a big hole in the granite floor. This was not something an ordinary person could do. Including his companions who were familiar with the apprentice knight, they were all shocked by his move. Even the apprentice knight himself was shocked. He had an incredulous expression on his face. Am I a genius? At the same time, Shirley's voice rang in Heath's ears again. She advised, if you don't want to get hurt, it's not too late to back off now. Heath said in surprise, why do you think a person who drank magic potions and barely had the power of a knight can hurt a real knight? Shirley reminded him, he's not a knight. Wizards had their own rules, and so did the secular world. The tournament was about swordsmanship, techniques, and not strength. Therefore, the tournament had stipulated that they could only use power of against the same level. Although the apprentice knight in front of him acted as if he had the power of a knight, the unique silver radiance of a knight did not appear, so Heath naturally could not activate the life force of a knight. It could be said that the rules were not well thought out, but that was how the rules were. The person who made the rules did not expect that someone would reach the strength of a knight without activating the life force. In any case, the current situation was that if Heath continued to fight, he would not be able to activate the life force. He could only use the strength of an apprentice knight to face the strength of a knight. Hence! Heath laughed out loud. You really know nothing about strength. After saying that, he held his sword and switched from defending to attacking. He took the initiative to attack the apprentice knight in front of him. Chapter 74, Fight. The distance of more than 10 meters was gone in a flash. Heath appeared in front of the man like a gust of wind, and raised his cross sword, and slashed down vertically. At this time, the man was still in a state of why am I so fierce, could it be that I have already advanced to a knight, could it be that I'm a genius, and so on. Therefore, he did not pay much attention to Heath's slash. He just casually blocked it. The strength of an apprentice knight was not worth mentioning to the man at the moment. When the cross swords collided, there was only an insignificant vibration coming from his wrist. The man, who had felt the taste of power for the first time, was extremely happy. He was about to say something to show off. However, before he could say anything, he suddenly felt a chill sweep over him for no reason. It was as if he had suddenly entered winter. He could not help but shiver and take 2 steps back. The man subconsciously glanced at the big sun hanging high in the dome. His expression was very surprised. Before he could figure it out, Heath's attack had already struck again. The man wanted to fight back, but there was also that inexplicable chill that followed. For some reason, the man now felt that he was extremely afraid of the cold. As soon as this chill swept up, he felt that his entire body could not exert any strength, so he could only continue to dodge and retreat. For a moment, a strange scene appeared on the stage. Heath attacked, and the man retreated. Heath attacked again, the man retreated again. He clearly had knight-level strength that could pierce through the floor with a single sword, but he was forced to retreat repeatedly by Heath without being able to retaliate. Everyone in the audience was staring with their eyes wide open. On the other side, Shirley, who was caught in the crowd, had a hint of surprise in her eyes. As the instigator, she naturally knew what was going on. The fire dragon grass was a strong fire element material, and it was very afraid of the cold. The potion she made with this material would also have the side effect of being afraid of the cold after people drank it. And Heath had cast a spell of the ice element every time he attacked, so of course, he was able to restrain the man. This apprentice. Shirley opened her eyes wide and looked at Heath in surprise. Although it sounded simple, the fire dragon grass was not a common material. She had not seen many apprentices before that knew it, let alone know its properties and restraining methods. However, Heath was able to accurately determine that she had used the fire dragon grass in a short period of time and had adopted an appropriate countermeasure. This was definitely not something that an ordinary apprentice could do. At that moment, Shirley could not help but take another look at Heath. It was quite strange. It was not the first time that the two of them had interacted with each other, but this was actually the first time that Shirley had looked directly at Heath. At the same time, the battle on the battlefield had also come to an end. Since he had already grasped the enemy's weakness, it was naturally impossible for Heath to lose. Under the premise that the other party had used spells, it was in accordance with the rules for him to use spells to fight back. The low-level apprentice spell Frost that he had obtained from Twilight Fortress was released one after another. The cross-shaped sword was faster than the other sword as it slashed towards the enemy, leaving the other party completely powerless to fight back. After a series of sword strikes, while the other party's movements were slow, he stabbed his sword at the other party's wrist, sending the other party's cross-shaped sword flying. Clang! The sound of the cross-shaped sword stabbing into the ground. This time, there was no immediate cheer in the arena. Instead, there was a moment of silence. After a few seconds, the winner has been decided? How did it be decided? Al lost? How did he suddenly lose? In the eyes of the audience, Heath was the only one fighting in the battle. The remaining opponents had been defending all along. Then, the cross blade was suddenly sent flying. This loss was really baffling. As the person involved, the apprentice knight himself was even more suspicious of life. After the match ended, he immediately retrieved his cross-shaped sword and waved it more than a dozen times. Without the restriction of frost, the momentum created by his peak strength was needless to say. Looking at the sword marks on the ground and listening to the sound of the wind, the apprentice knight was so angry that he almost shut himself up. Regardless of whether he accepted it or not, the winner was decided. After the rest, it was time for the next round. This time, Heath's opponent was still an apprentice knight from a Lund city. Moreover, as soon as he entered the ring, Heath smelled a strong drug. It was as if Shirley had fed him drugs during the break of the match. It was too easy for a wizard drug to control a mortal. Shirley looked at Heath in the ring and said provocatively, "If you have the ability, come and undo it again." The spell being broken by an apprentice who was one rank lower than her had stimulated her. Heath smiled and said, "As you wish." Clang! The sound of metal interweaving sounded, and the battle began once again. With the previous experience, the apprentice knight who was fighting against Heath did not delay at all. As soon as the bell rang, he immediately launched an attack on Heath. Similarly, compared to the past, his overall strength had also increased by a lot. However, in order to prevent that dazed situation from happening, Shirley had specially used hypnosis this time to let the apprentice knight calmly accept this strength that did not belong to him. There was only victory and defeat in his eyes. Day! 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 The hurried footsteps sounded like a cheetah going all out. In the blink of an eye, the apprentice knight had already appeared in front of Heath. Whoosh! Whoosh! The cold sound of rushing wind whistled. The cross-shaped sword raised by the apprentice knight was like a bright moon, shining with a dazzling cold light. Clang! The sound of metal interweaving could be heard. The cross-shaped sword raised by Heath accurately blocked the enemy's attack. TSS TSS. A barely audible TSS TSS sound could be heard. Suddenly, a wave of lightning elemental fluctuations that only wizards could feel was transmitted from the space. Shirley's face darkened. At the same time, an invisible electric current had already passed through the crossblade to the apprentice knight's wrist. After a sharp pain, the apprentice knight felt as if he had been stabbed by a needle and jumped backward like a little girl. He almost lost his grip on the crossblade in his hand. Similarly, the moment the man entered the arena, Heath could smell the deep water flower through the smell of potions in the air. Similar to the first fire dragon grass, the deep water flower was also a material with strong attributes. While it could greatly increase a person's 3 limbs attributes, it could also cause a person to enter a weak electric state. There was nothing easier to deal with this kind of potion than electrocuting him. Hence, after 3 to 5 rounds of exchange, this apprentice knight followed in the footsteps of his companion. He was sent flying by the crossblade and ran off the stage to shut himself up. After a period of rest, the battlefield entered the 3rd round. After losing in the 2nd round, Shirley had long let go of the contempt in her heart. She put on 120% spirit. When drugging the 3rd apprentice knight, she had specially selected the most unorthodox material, boiling blood grass. This material was extremely rare. More importantly, it was not a material with strong attributes. It would not be restrained like before. However, when the apprentice knight stood on the stage, Heath still had a confident smile on his face. Since then, Shirley had realized that this round was probably not going well. As expected, although the potion made from boiling blood grass would not be countered, its weakness was that the effect of the potion was very short. Moreover, once the effect wore off, it would cause the person to enter a weak state. Heath, who was well aware of this, found an excuse to drag out the time as soon as he entered the field. This dragged on for a few minutes. Before the battle began, the 3rd apprentice knight threw down his cross sword due to a sudden illness and voluntarily surrendered. Knight of Riiden. Heath wins. When the referee announced the victory in an unbelievable tone, the field once again fell into a strange silence. This time, even the instigator, Shirley, could not speak. At this moment, she was no longer as arrogant as before. She was just standing there in a daze. Her expression was a little flustered and a little helpless. Because she suddenly realized. Now, other than her personally entering the arena, she seemed to really have no way to deal with this low-level apprentice. Chapter 75, Fight for Victory. Silence. Silence. A strange silence. Without the cheers and shouts from before, everyone in the audience looked as if they had seen a ghost. They looked at Heath in confusion. There was nothing they could do. The 3 matches had gone on too inexplicably. The player on the field seemed to have some kind of strange magic. The 3 players who had fought against him clearly had extraordinary strength, but they had all lost to him inexplicably. Could it be a fake? Everyone could not help but look at the noble who was in charge of organizing the competition in the audience seats. The latter was so scared that he kept wiping his cold sweat. No matter how much they did not believe it, the truth was the truth. Riiden's knight, Heath, wins. As the referee announced again, the curtain was lifted for the 3rd round of the competition. Only the final match was left in front of Heath. The champion was within reach. The other group's competition had yet to be decided. Taking advantage of this gap, Heath went to the tent in the resting area to rest. Gathering intelligence was something that only mortals needed to do. The only opponents of wizards were wizards. Knight Heath, you are greater than a god. I have never seen a knight like you. I have a niece. If you are willing, I can let her marry you at any time. In the future, when I take back my territory, I promise I will grant you a farm. In the tent, Baron Garcia's face was beaming with joy. He had never thought that this knight who had been chosen when he had no other choice would be so outstanding. He had fought all the way to the finals, which was far beyond his expectations. According to the rules, whoever wrote the recommendation letter would represent their family. The superior performance of the knight in the competition would also directly affect the family that recommended him. Especially for Baron Garcia, this influence was not just a little bit. Who are you? At this moment, a figure walked into the tent. The male servant who was standing guard at the side hurried forward to chase them away. This is the resting area for knights of the Garcia family. Get out quickly. As soon as he finished speaking, the cloaked person suddenly raised their hand and sent a ball of black gas over. The male servant immediately fell asleep when he smelled the black gas. Baron Garcia did not understand what had happened when the ball of black gas rushed over, causing him to quickly follow in the footsteps of the male servant. In the room, only Heath was safe and sound. The figure stopped and quietly confronted Heath. His gaze was still sharp. Heath smiled faintly. What? Apprentice Shirley is going to do it herself. Shirley said, that Holy Spirit flower is mine. I've already told you, don't bring trouble on yourself. Heath became angry when he heard that. The treasure hunt outside depended on one's ability. If you said it was yours, then it was yours? Yet, you had to let others give it to you, and you even had a face that said if you didn't let them, then they would take care of you. What right did this have? Heath said, if you're not going to make a move, then please leave. He did not feel any elemental fluctuations from Shirley, or any signs before casting the spell. Sherry was still standing where she was. Heath was impatient and wanted to chase her away. But at that moment, Sherry suddenly said, that Holy Spirit flower. I took a liking to it first. Although the lines did not change, one could hear that there were a lot of ups and downs in the tone of her voice. She looked at Heath. There was no longer the arrogance in her eyes. There was only fear and helplessness. There seemed to be tears in the corner of her eyes. This should be the case, right? Heath felt inexplicable. Shirley was like a kitten that had been forced into a corner by a wild beast. That Holy Spirit flower. I took a fancy to it first. Her voice trembled, but she bit her lips, as if she was maintaining her last bit of stubbornness. Heath frowned. He was about to answer, but at that moment. Player, Heath Nguyen, enter the arena. The referee's voice suddenly came from outside. Heath said, let's wait until the match is over. These were all trivial matters. He had not forgotten why he had come here. After saying that, he left the tent and walked towards the arena without waiting for Shirley's reply. Because it was the finals, there were a lot of people gathered in front of the arena at this time. Everyone's gaze seemed to be focused here. When they saw Heath enter the ring, everyone's expressions became strange. Some were curious, some were unhappy, and some were looking forward to it. Tiffany tugged at the corner of Elsa's clothes and asked, Elsa, do you think he can still create miracles? Elsa shook her head. I think it's difficult. A battle on foot is not like a battle on horseback. His opponent is real. And we saw it just now. He is a real knight, and he even defeated Knight Blue. Tiffany said, but it's not bad to be here. When Lord Gallio arrives, he will definitely give him some pointers. Elsa sneered. I think Lord Gallio can only give pointers to normal people. Everyone could see how he got into the finals, right? Under all kinds of gazes, Heath walked onto the stage. His opponent had been waiting for a long time. He was wearing a mask, so his face could not be seen clearly. However, judging from his figure, he should not be very old. He should be in his 30s. Heath subconsciously looked up and down. However, when he looked down, he was quite surprised. An expert. The person holding the sword could tell the autumn from a single leaf. Whether it was the posture, the gaze, or the aura of this man, he looked extraordinary. He was definitely not someone that the apprentice knights before him could compare to. No, even if he was among the knights, he was still a top-notch person. He did not pay much attention to the battle of the other group just now. Although he knew that a knight-level character had appeared over there, he did not expect that it would be such an expert. He could not help but raise his eyebrows. Knight. The other party did not speak and only nodded. Heath asked again, Peak. The other party still nodded. Heath said, since that's the case, then let's go all out. What do you think, sir? As he said that, he no longer restrained himself and released all the power of a knight. A faint silver glow naturally gushed out from his body, rolling up the sand and stones on the ground to form a small tornado that rotated slightly around him. Seeing this scene, the audience, who had been silent for a long time, exploded again. Knight. That young man is a knight. My God! How is this possible? So he was sure to win from the very beginning. How old does he look? Those who had been doubting Heath's unfair victory just now all shut their mouths. Obviously, everyone was shocked by the strength that Heath had revealed at this moment. The masked man, who was Heath's opponent, also had his eyes lit up. Not only was the masked man not anxious when his opponent revealed his powerful strength, he seemed to be very excited instead. Heath could clearly feel that his aura had suddenly become much more active. Heath could not help but think, could it be that I've met a lunatic? Clang! The crisp sound of a bell rang. The battle was pulled open in the midst of his confusion. Whoosh! Whoosh! Two sharp whistling sounds that sounded like arrows piercing through the wind rang out on the field. The two figures rushed towards each other almost at the same time. Their extremely fast speed was like two streams of light, so fast that people could not even see them clearly. In the next second, clang! The sound of metal interweaving like a gong exploded. The two figures collided in the middle of the arena. The two cross swords were also placed together, and large sparks shot into the sky. No one had expected that. This battle had reached its peak at the beginning.